Chapter 1527 Getting the 5 Years Quest Reward. Chapter 1527 Getting the 5 Years Quest Reward. Author's note. Unedited chapter. This position is better off with someone who will actually be available. Gustav shook his head. When the thought about it, Gustav was right. Looking at the situation, the world leaders were definitely aware of this as well. However, if Gustav joined, it would be as though he was a part of them in name only. It would quell the unrest while Gustav wouldn't have the time to really keep the government in check. It was a win-win for them. Will you refuse them? The world balance may fall apart though, Eldris chipped in from the side. I'll think about it, Gustav finally said with a contemplative tone. Xanatos nodded with an expression of understanding. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your vacation. The holographic projection flickered and disappeared, leaving the group to digest the conversation. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a deep orange glow over the ocean. Well, that was intense. So, Gustav, world leader, huh? EE said with a chuckle. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Gustav gave him a light slap at the back of his head. Falco grinned. Hey, if you become a world leader, does that mean we get special privileges? The place soon erupted with laughter as they kept talking about this all through the night. Gustav and the others finally returned to Plankton City the next day. As they made their way through the airport, a swarm of reporters descended upon them, eager to get a word from Gustav. Mr. Crimson, can you tell us if you're going to accept the position as a world leader? One reporter shouted as a floating MIC hovered before him. How do you feel about the protests that have erupted worldwide? Another chimed in as camera lenses clicked incessantly. Gustav maintained his composure and ignored the barrage of questions without pausing. His friends formed a protective barrier around him, ensuring that the reporters couldn't get too close. Angie stayed particularly close with a straight expression. The group got into hover cars that was already waiting for them and waved each other goodbye. It was time for them all to get back to their families after the last week vacation. They would rendezvous later at Eastes Place. Besides Matilda and Empress Daria, Gustav and Endrik were the only ones who left together. They finally reached a luxurious penthouse Gustav had booked. Since he cleared his name, he hadn't returned to the MBO. The penthouse was spacious and elegantly furnished, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the cityscape. Soft lighting and minimalist decor added to the serene atmosphere, providing a perfect retreat from the chaos outside. Once inside, Gustav let out a deep sigh of relief. Finally away from all the pestering, he said while looking around the familiar surroundings. What do you intend to do now, big brother? Endrik inquired. Preparations. What about you? Gustav asked. Same. Over the next few days, Gustav found himself with much-needed solitude to plan for his upcoming trip to planet Aegon. The world continued to buzz with speculation about whether he would accept the position of world leader, but Gustav focused on the task at hand. In the penthouse, Gustav gathered the sacred items currently in his possession. The void stepper boots, the ancient hourglass, and the sacred armor, which Endrik had finally handed to him. He wrapped a layer of compressive space around the armor to suppress the energy it was giving off. It was still a highly sus-about artifact, so he wouldn't want to attract unnecessary forces to this place. Cohilia, the living devourer, remained embedded in his left palm. This meant he had 4 out of 5 sacred treasures. Gustav sat cross-legged in the middle of his spacious living room, channeling his bloodline and taking stock of his abilities. He was acutely aware that he was still at the 4th step of beta rank, yet he currently held the title of World's Strongest. He had achieved this during the intense battle with Angie and Jack, but at the time didn't notice it because things were pretty intense. As he meditated, focusing on his internal energy and power, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he had come. The journey had been arduous, filled with challenges and trials, and yet he had successfully completed one out of the 5 years quest. One evening, Gustav was checking his system stats. Host attributes: name, Gustav Crimson level, 210 class, transdimensional being EXP, 670400300302000000 HP, 450 energy, 210, 000210 Attributes: strength, 899 perception, 895 mental fortitude, 898 agility, 896 speed, 899 bravery, 897 intelligence, 895 charm, 411 defense, 898 vitality, 893 endurance, 896 attributes points, 127 underscore 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 underscore. Is there really no limit as to how powerful I can get from the system? Gustav thought about how he was already beyond level 200. Besides strength from all of his bloodlines, he also had strength from the system and then strength from being a cosmic superior being. It felt like he had limitless potential. Unfortunately, whether he had limitless potential or not, strength had to be cultivated. One couldn't just achieve the highest level with a snap of the fingers. Chaos wasn't going to wait for him to cultivate strength before it struck. So it didn't really matter that he could keep improving. What mattered the most right now was speed. As he reviewed his stats, a new system notification popped up, catching his attention. System notification. Rewards for becoming the world's strongest mixed blood, issuing rewards. Gustav's eyes widened in anticipation as the notification continued. Congratulations, host. As the world's strongest mixed blood, you have unlocked the following rewards. Cosmic insight. Gain knowledge of otherworldly forces upon contact. Level up ×3, +2 bloodlines unlock. System notification. Since Shops has been sacrificed to attain system manifestation in the past, credits will be replaced with a different reward, +2 skill evolution cards. +200 attribute points. Gustav felt a surge of energy course through him as the level-up rewards took effect. Finally, the rewards are here, Gustav mumbled with a scrutinizing gaze. I was held up, the system voice rang in his mind. Held up with what? Gustav questioned with a suspicious tone. A red light phased out of him in the next instant and the system materialized in its usual teenage girl form. Origins. You're going to be discovering my origins soon, the system voiced. Activating cosmic insight, Gustav saw the notification appear before him after staring at the system's physical form. Archaic otherworldly artificial life form detected drawing information from the Thraxiac dimension created for the purpose of not now. The system suddenly retracted back into Gustav, causing the readings in his line of sight to stop. What the hell? Get back out here. Gustav voiced with a strong tone. No. Not yet, you've been saying this for years. It's about time I figured out everything else you're hiding. You will but at least hold on till after you get back from the citrus void. It will interfere with your mission. I highly doubt that. Your ass is not to be trusted. I'm telling you the truth. Your head has to be in the game. Things relating to me should only be secondary. How about you go fuck yourself, Gustav stated with a tone of annoyance. At that moment, Angie walked into the room. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Gustav answered with a nod. He still hadn't let Angie know that there was something living inside of him. The boys were already aware, but he didn't know how Angie would react if she found out that the something could become a girl. Who knew how she would take it? I heard you earlier. You sounded agitated. Angie sat beside him with a slightly worried look. No, I'm fine. Just preparing for the Aegon trip, Gustav said to her. Oh, all right. Mum said to ask if you were joining us for dinner, Angie inquired. Sure thing. Just let me brush things up here, he responded with a smile. Angie smiled back and gave him a kiss on his left cheek. See you soon, babe. After Angie stepped out, Gustav's face went back to a frown. Fuck you. He yelled internally. You'd break Angie's heart if you did that. Gustav rolled his eyes in response. He couldn't be bothered to reply. He stared at the two bloodlines he got from the reward. Primal Bond, grade bloodline that grants one the ability to boost the bloodline abilities of everyone around them based on the strength of their bond. Raw Assimilation, a grade bloodline that grants one the ability to merge with raw non-living matter. Gustav imagined the possibilities these two bloodlines presented. Primal Bond was particularly intriguing. The idea of enhancing the strength and abilities of his friends based on the depth of their bond was both powerful and meaningful. It would allow him to support his allies in ways he had never been able to before, strengthening their collective resolve and abilities during critical moments. Chapter 1528 Dinner with Angius Family. Chapter 1528 Dinner with Angius Family. Author's note. Unedited chapter. He turned his attention to raw assimilation. His genetic transformation bloodline already granted him an assimilation ability, but this one was fundamentally different. With genetic transformation, he could assimilate with living tissue, people, aliens, or organisms. However, raw assimilation opened up a realm of new possibilities. He could merge with non-living matter, potentially even something as vast as a moon or as powerful as a star. The idea was exhilarating, the potential applications endless. As Gustav considered these new bloodlines, his thoughts shifted to the 2 skill evolution cards he had also received as part of his rewards. He pondered which skills to evolve next, knowing that his choices could significantly impact his future capabilities. Before he could make a decision, he recalled the dinner he had agreed to have with Angius Family. Realizing the time, Gustav decided it was best to get ready. He headed to his bedroom, which was a minimal yet compact and cozy setup. He stepped into the ensuite bathroom to freshen up. The shower, with its multiple jets and rainfall feature, was a welcome respite. As the warm water cascaded over him, he allowed himself a moment to relax and clear his mind. Once freshened up, Gustav chose a casual yet stylish outfit: dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored red jacket. He checked his reflection in the mirror, ensuring he looked presentable for dinner. Satisfied, he made his way to the living room, where he grabbed his keys and phone. Before leaving, he sent a quick message to Angie: "Heading out now. See you soon." A few moments later, his phone beeped with Angius' reply: "Can't wait." Moi. Gustav smiled and pocketed the device as he stepped towards the balcony area. It would seem that his location had been revealed, so the press was cooped up at the entry point of the skyscraper. The world before him came to a pause as Gustav leapt into the air and vanished. Gustav stood outside Angius' apartment building with some flowers in his grasp and a slight smile playing on his lips. As he walked up to the apartment door, it swung open to reveal Mr. and Mrs. Valandrabadia. Mrs. Valandrabadia displayed a welcoming smile. "Good evening, Gustav," Mrs. Valandrabadia greeted warmly. "We're so glad you could join us tonight." Mr. Valandrabadia extended his hand. "It's good to see you again, Gustav. Come in, make yourself at home." Gustav shook his hand and stepped inside. "Thank you for having me." The apartment was cozy and inviting, with family holographic photos adorning a side of the wall and the scent of a delicious meal wafting through the air. The dining table was set with elegant dishware, and a variety of mouth-watering dishes were spread out, indicating the effort the family had put into the evening. As they moved into the living room, Gustav noticed Phil, Angius' little brother. Phil was no longer the small boy Gustav remembered. Despite being 15, he was almost fully grown, with a build that hinted at his future strength. "Hey, Phil," Gustav greeted with a nod, genuinely surprised by his growth. "You've grown a lot since I last saw you." Phil smiled shyly, his voice deeper than before. "Hey, Gustav. Yeah, it's been a while." Angie appeared, a radiant smile on her face as she walked over to Gustav and linked her arm through his. "Come on, everyone. Let's sit down for dinner." They all gathered around the table as the atmosphere was filled with warmth. The meal was a delightful affair, with an array of flavors that showcased Mrs. Valandrabadia's culinary skills. Gustav tried not to compare her cooking to that of Boss Danzo's, since he made an habit of doing that for every meal he had. As they ate, they chatted and reminisced about the past, sharing stories and laughter that bridged the time and experiences they had missed. They remembered how things used to be much simpler back in their previous neighborhood before Gustav and Angie joined the MBO. Mr. Valandrabadia recounted an amusing tale from Angie's childhood, causing everyone to laugh. "Remember the time Angie tried to build a rocket in the backyard? She was so determined to reach the stars." Angie groaned, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Dad, not that story again." Gustav chuckled, his heart warming at the familial banter. "I'd love to hear more about Angie's childhood adventures." Mrs. Valandrabadia smiled. She was always so fearless, much like she is now. After the meal, as they moved to the living room for dessert, Mr. and Mrs. Valandrabadia grew more serious. Mr. Valandrabadia cleared his throat and looked at Gustav with sincerity. "Gustav, there's something we need to say," he began. "When Angie disappeared, we were devastated. We were angry and scared, and we took a lot of that out on you. We were wrong." Mrs. Valandrabadia nodded with a remorseful look. "We're so sorry for how we treated you, Gustav. Thank you for saving our daughter. You don't need to apologize. I made a promise to protect Angie, and I failed. I can't blame any of you, but I'll make sure to keep that promise in the future." Mr. Valandrabadia's voice was filled with emotions. "Thank you, Gustav. You've done more for our family than we can ever repay." Phil, who had been silent, spoke up. "Gustav, can I talk to you outside for a moment?" Gustav nodded, standing up. "Of course." They stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Phil looked at Gustav with a serious look. "I need to apologize too," Phil began, his voice trembling slightly. "For the longest time, I hated you. When Angie was missing, I hated myself for looking up to you. I blamed you for everything." Gustav remained silent, giving Phil the space to express his feelings. Phil continued, his eyes filled with regret. "When Angie returned and told us what happened, how you sacrificed yourself to save her, I realized how stupid I'd been. You must love her just like we do. Maybe even more. When she was lost, you must have been hurt too, right?" Gustav placed a reassuring hand on Phil's shoulder. "I was, Phil. But what matters is that Angie is safe now. And that's all I care about." Tears welled up in Phil's eyes as he looked at Gustav. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Thank you for saving my sister." Gustav smiled gently, patting Phil's back. "Don't worry about it. We all went through a lot. What's important is how it turned out." Phil wiped his eyes, his voice breaking. "Thank you, big brother Gustav. Really." They stood there for a moment in silence, staring into the distance with smiles on their faces. After a while, Angie appeared at the door, a soft smile on her face. "Everything okay out here?" she asked. Phil nodded with red eyes but a lighter expression. "Yeah. Thanks, big brother Gustav." It was obvious that he'd been carrying a weight of guilt all this time, and now that he had gotten it off his chest, he felt better. He headed back inside, leaving Gustav and Angie alone. She walked up to him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you for talking to him," she said softly. "Phil led a campaign when you were still unconscious and in custody before your trial. He rallied so many people, trying to get justice for you." Gustav raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Really? Phil did that?" Angie nodded. "He looks up to you, Gustav. Even when he was angry, he still admired you. And when he realized how much you cared for me and put yourself on the line to save me, it made him want to fight for you. He's a good kid. You've got a great family, Angie." Gustav had a brief recollection of everything that happened when Angie was missing. Angie wrapped her arms around him while resting her head on his chest. "As do you, because you're our family too. We're so lucky to have you, Gus." Gustav held her close, feeling the warmth of her embrace. "Perhaps, I'm the lucky one." About a day later, Gustav sat in the living area of his luxurious penthouse. The evening was calm, but inside his mind, a storm of decisions brewed. He leaned back into the plush leather sofa, his thoughts fixated on the 2-skill evolution cards. These cards were potent, capable of transforming his abilities into something far more powerful and versatile. He brought up his system skills and abilities collection, causing a holographic panel to materialize before him. The list was long, over 200 skills and abilities which he had acquired over the years. However, only the skills that were maxed out could be evolved, and that narrowed his choices down to a handful of his most critical abilities. Skills and abilities: Lightning Blitz, level 7, Sprint, level max, Chop, level max, Slash, level max, God Eyes, level max, Flight, level 8, combination, level max, super jump, level max, strength boost, level 9, bloodline acquisition, level max, bloodline hold, level 8, bloodline transfer, level max, palm strike, level max, silent advancement, level max, energy discharge, level max, miniature, black hole, level 5, recreation, level max, toxin immunity, level max. Chapter 1529 Testing out the Evolved Acquisition. Chapter 1529 Testing out the Evolved Acquisition. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav stared at the list, and after many seconds, his eyes lingered on bloodline acquisition. He had used this ability countless times to gain new bloodlines, but he hadn't used it quite some time. It had been instrumental in his growth, allowing him to steal the abilities of others. But the idea of evolving it intrigued him. What could it become? How much more powerful could it make him? Bloodline acquisition, Gustav muttered to himself, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. It's been one of my cornerstone abilities. If I evolve it, what new possibilities will it unlock? After a few more moments of contemplation, he made up his mind. Host has decided to use skill evolution card, evolving bloodline acquisition, 100%. The panel began to glow brightly as the evolution process started. Gustav watched, his anticipation growing with each passing second. The percentage climbed steadily, and he could feel the air around him thrumming with energy. As the evolution reached completion, the panel flashed a final message: evolution complete, bloodline acquisition skill has been evolved into acquisition. Gustav quickly checked the details of his newly evolved skill. Acquisition, level 1. Ability to extract the bloodlines and core supernatural strength of mixed bloods and aliens. Ability to isolate specific abilities and extract them. Ability to steal the supernatural abilities of everyone and anyone within a range of 2,000 feet and use it as your own for a specific amount of time. Gustav's eyes widened as he read the information. The new skill was far beyond what he had imagined. The ability to extract abilities of everyone around him and use them within such a vast range was a game-changer. He could effectively neutralize any threat within a 2,000-foot radius and turn their strengths against them. If it was this mouth gaping at level 1, how powerful would it be when it increased in levels? This is incredible, Gustav muttered, leaning back against the sofa, trying to absorb the implications. I can not only extract bloodlines but also isolate specific abilities to extract instead of taking the whole bloodline. I can also steal everyone's abilities around me and use them temporarily. This gives me an edge in almost any situation. He stood up, pacing the room as he thought it through. In a battle, I can disable my opponent's powers and use them myself. This can turn the tide of any fight, especially if I'm outnumbered or facing particularly powerful foes. Gustav looked out the window with a thoughtful gaze. The evolution of this skill was not just an enhancement of his abilities, it was a leap into a new realm of potential. I need to test this, he thought out loud. The possibilities were endless, but he knew he had to approach this with caution. The ability to steal abilities of everyone within a 2,000 feet radius was potent, but it also came with risks. What if he absorbed multiple abilities that were related to transformation? Could he transform into multiple forms at a time? Or would the power just be stored in him in the meantime until he decided on whether or not to activate it? He leaned towards the later, but even with he was still curious. Taking the abilities of everyone in the surroundings was only temporary and would be returned back to them after a specific amount of time. He needed to know how much time he would have after doing that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the cityscape, Gustav transformed into a darker version of himself while changing a few facial features. He didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to himself. After that, he leaped off the balcony, descending swiftly towards a lower, less populated part of the city. He landed softly in a deserted field with a still and quiet air. The field was surrounded by a mix of residential and commercial buildings, a perfect location for his test. Acquisition has been activated, the notification appeared in his line of sight, and Gustav immediately focused his will, commanding the bloodline abilities of everyone within a 2,000-foot radius to be drawn to him. Almost instantly, He felt a surge of energy as a glowing aura enveloping his being. At the same moment, a chorus of gasps and murmurs of disbelief echoed from the surrounding buildings and streets. What's happening? My bloodline. I can't sense it. I feel so weak. Gustav could hear the panic in their voices, but he remained focused, absorbing the newfound abilities. He could feel the strength of dozens of mixed bloods coursing through him, each power adding to his own. They were not in any way tampered with, remaining at the same level the original mixed blood had developed it to. This is incredible, Gustav muttered. He looked around the empty field, contemplating how to test these abilities. Let's start simple. He raised his hand, summoning a bolt of lightning from the sky, a bloodline he had just acquired. The lightning struck the ground with a deafening crack, leaving a smoldering crater. Next, he focused on another ability, feeling the ground beneath him shift. With a mere thought, he lifted a large chunk of earth, shaping it into a protective barrier. Earth manipulation. He mused, examining the solid wall he had created. 1:30, he took note of the countdown in his line of sight, reminding him of the limited time he had with these abilities. Gustav decided to push further, testing as many skills as he could. He closed his eyes and focused on the next ability. His body shimmered and disappeared, reappearing a moment later several feet away. Spatial movement. He turned into a beast covered in flames and even created a vortex of wind and fire. He manipulated glass in the surroundings, turning them to different intricate shapes. He even tested out a blood-related ability. As the timer reached its final seconds, Gustav gently lowered himself back to the ground, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He had tested a wide range of abilities and understood the immense power of acquisition. Midnight, in an instant, the aura around him faded, and he felt the abilities leaving his body, returning to their rightful owners. The field around him was suddenly filled with cries of relief and confusion as mixed bloods regained their powers. What was that? I've got my powers back. Did anyone else feel that? Gustav had a thoughtful expression on his face. He had witnessed the potential chaos that acquisition could cause, but he also recognized the immense tactical advantage it provided. He started walking back towards his penthouse as his mind got filled millions of strategic ways he could make use of it. As he moved through the now bustling streets, he overheard snippets of conversations, people still reeling from the temporary loss of their abilities. I swear, my powers were just gone. It felt like something was pulling them out of me. Do you think it's a new enemy? Gustav smiled to himself, knowing that he had caused quite a stir. As he approached his penthouse, he couldn't help but reflect on the test. I need to keep it hidden. It could really come in handy so long as enemies are taken unaware by it. Gustav sat in his penthouse, contemplating which ability to enhance next. His skill collection was vast, each with its own unique advantages, making the decision even more challenging. Maybe I'll decide later, he muttered to himself. The holographic TV flickered on, casting a soft blue glow across the room. The news channel was reporting on the latest global events, from political upheavals to technological advancements. Endrik glanced over. Still thinking about your decision? Not really. I don't think I'll be doing it. Gustav shook his head. Before Endrik could respond, Gustav sensed someone approaching the door. No, not just one person, two. The air outside seemed to shift with their presence, and a moment later, there was a knock. Gustav rose to his feet as his expression hard-ended. I'll get it. He headed to the door in the next instant. He wasn't willing to invite whoever it was into his home. He opened the door and stepped outside, immediately recognizing the two figures before him. The gravity of their presence was immediately apparent. They radiated the power and authority typical of Alfranked mixed bloods. They were world leaders. The one on the left was a tall man with graying hair. His posture was straight, and his piercing azure eyes conveyed both intelligence and determination. He wore a flowing dark green robe that shimmered slightly in the fading daylight, the intricate gold embroidery along the hem and sleeves adding a touch of dignifying elegance. The robe was belted at the waist with a finely crafted leather belt, adorned with a large, polished emerald that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Beside him stood the other, a woman with sharp features and green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her dark hair was pulled back into an elegant updo, and she wore a flowing midnight blue gown that complemented her commanding presence. Chapter 1530. Is this your answer? Chapter 1530. Is this your answer? Author's note. Unedited chapter. The woman's gown was made of a silky, almost iridescent fabric that caught the light with every movement, creating a mesmerizing effect. Silver patterns, resembling constellations, were woven into the fabric, giving her an almost celestial appearance. Around her neck hung a pendant with a deep blue sapphire, its depth matching the intensity of her gaze. Gustav's eyes narrowed as he regarded them coldly. "What do you want?" he asked with an icy tone. The man spoke first. "Gustav, we've come to discuss the offer to join us as a world leader. Your influence and power could help stabilize the current unrest." Gustav crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I've already made it clear that I'm not interested in a position I can't commit to. I won't be around to serve properly." The female world leader stepped forward. "The world is on the brink of chaos, Gustav. Your presence could bring the order we desperately need." Gustav's patience was wearing thin. "I don't care about your politics or your power struggles. If that's all you came to say, you can leave the way you came." The leaders exchanged glances, clearly not willing to give up so easily. "Please, Gustav," the woman pleaded. "Consider the impact you could have. A lot of people now look up to you. They trust you." Gustav smirked as a dangerous glint appeared in his eye. "I have a proposition for you. It's the only one you'll be getting from me. If you don't agree to it, we have nothing more to talk about." The leaders looked intrigued, though wary. "What is this proposition?" the man asked. "You'll hear about it at the press meeting," Gustav replied, his tone final. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." Without waiting for a response, Gustav turned and headed toward the entrance of the skyscraper. The leaders followed at a distance, clearly unsettled by his abrupt dismissal. As he approached the ground floor, the noise from outside grew louder. The press and media were still gathered in droves. Their cameras and microphones were ready to capture any statement he made. Gustav stepped outside as the cool evening air a sharp breezed by and the surroundings were filled with the clamor of the reporters. The moment he appeared, the crowd erupted with questions. "Gustav, are you considering the offer to become a world leader? What's your response to the current global unrest? Can you give us any insight into your future plans?" Gustav raised a hand, signaling for silence. The reporters quieted, their eyes trained on him, eager for his words. "I understand there's a lot of speculation about my role in the future," Gustav began, his voice steady and commanding. "I have no interest in becoming a world leader. I cannot serve in a position that requires my constant presence when I have other responsibilities." The crowd murmured, but Gustav continued. "However, I do have a proposition for the current world leaders. One that I believe could address the issues we're facing more effectively than a simple title change." The cameras zoomed in, capturing every word. The two leaders who had approached him earlier watched from the side, their expressions tense. "What is this proposition?" a reporter asked, his voice cutting through the murmur. Gustav's eyes scanned the crowd, his gaze intense. "I propose the creation of an independent council composed of the most capable and trustworthy individuals from various fields: science, medicine, defense, and yes, law enforcement. This council would work together to address global issues, free from political agendas and corruption. They will have the power to sanction the world government and any other authoritative agencies all across the world for any wrong actions." The reporters were stunned into silence for a moment before the questions began to fly. Who would be on this council? How would they be selected? Would you lead this council, Gustav? Gustav raised his hand again, quieting them. The council members would be selected based on their expertise and integrity. They would be individuals who have proven themselves through their actions, not their words. I won't necessarily claim leadership of the council, however, I will work together with the members and the council will directly answer to me. They will carry on with their duties even when I am not present on Earth. The male world leader from earlier stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. "And how do you propose we go about establishing this council?" Gustav looked at him with a faint smirk. "That's for the people to decide. I've given you the idea. If you truly care about stabilizing the world, you'll find a way to make it happen. After the world leaders agree to this, the people will decide on their candidates. Is this your answer?" Gustav crimsoned. There was a tense silence as the leaders processed his words. The female leader finally spoke with a thoughtful gaze. "It's a bold idea, Gustav. One that could indeed make a difference." Gustav nodded. "Bold actions are needed in bold times. If you agree to this, I'll lend my support and help where I can. But if you continue to play politics, you'll find no ally in me." The crowd buzzed with renewed energy as the implications of Gustav's proposition sunk in. The two leaders present conferred quietly for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Well, consider it, Gustav," the man said finally. "Thank you for your time." Gustav nodded, turning back to the press. "That's all for now. I have preparations to make." With that, he stepped back into the skyscraper as the doors slid shut behind him. Endrik was waiting for him in the living room, a curious look on his face. "What happened out there?" Gustav shrugged, sitting down beside him. "I proposed the creation of an independent council to address global issues. This independent council will be above the world leaders and every authority on Earth. Now let's see if they have the guts to follow through." Endrik chuckled, shaking his head. "You really gave them a lot to think about." Gustav smirked. "I had to do it in front of the press to give them little chances of refusal." The morning after Gustav's public proposal, the world was abuzz with conversation and speculation. News outlets and social media platforms were flooded with discussions about his proposition. Headlines screamed the news from every corner of the globe. Gustav Crimson proposes independent council to oversee government decisions and address global issue. Will world leaders accept Gustav's bold plan? Public support surges for independent council. In every city, people gathered to talk about Gustav's idea. From cafes to markets, the consensus was clear: if the world government truly cared about the people, they would accept Gustav's proposal. "The man's got a point," said an elderly gentleman in a popular pub. "Politics as usual isn't working. Maybe it's time we tried something different." "I agree," responded a young woman, sipping her coffee in a New York City diner. "Gustav's idea of an independent council makes sense. We need leaders who care more about people than power." The protests, which had already been simmering, gained new momentum. Crowds of demonstrators carried signs that read, "Support the council and listen to Gustav." The pressure on world leaders was mounting, and they knew they had to respond. In government buildings across the globe, high-ranking officials held frantic meetings. The tension was high as they debated the merits and risks of Gustav's proposal. "This is unprecedented," said one leader, pounding his fist on the table. "We can't just hand over power to a 21-year-old. "But look at the state of the world," countered another. "If we don't act, we risk losing everything. The people are with him. They trust him." Voices rose and fell in heated arguments. Some leaders were adamantly against the idea, unwilling to relinquish their control. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, argued for change. "Think about it," urged a young diplomat. "If we show that we're willing to listen to the people and take bold steps, we could regain their trust. This could be the fresh start we need." After 3 days of intense deliberation, the world government made a historic decision. They would accept Gustav's proposal and establish the independent council. The announcement was met with widespread relief and cautious optimism. Gustav was just 2 days away from his planned departure for Aegon when he received the news. He knew he had to postpone his trip to help set up the council. He couldn't just leave it in the hands of anyone. That evening, Gustav addressed the world once more. "Thank you for your support and trust," he began. "We have a unique opportunity to reshape our world, to create a system that truly serves the people. The people will select individuals of integrity and expertise to form this independent council." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Gustav employed the help of EE and the others to set up an online platform where people could nominate and vote for candidates. They encouraged everyone to participate, emphasizing the importance of choosing individuals who embodied the values of humanity, compassion, and expertise in their respective fields. Chapter 1531 Independent Council successfully formed. Chapter 1531 Independent Council successfully formed. Author's note. Unedited chapter. In cities around the world, people gathered in community centers, schools, and libraries, discussing potential candidates and casting their votes. The energy was electric, a sense of hope and possibility infusing the air. Gustav sat in his penthouse, the holographic interface before him displaying a live feed of the nominations and votes. He and the team he had set up pored over the data, identifying individuals who received strong public support. "Look at this," said one of his advisors, pointing to a name on the screen. Dr. Patel Martinez, a leading expert in renewable energy. "She's been nominated by thousands of people. She seems like the kind of person we need," Gustav agreed. "Let's add her to the shortlist, but I'll interrogate her myself later." As the days passed, the shortlist grew longer. There were doctors, scientists, educators, social workers, and activists from all corners of the globe. Each had a proven track record of dedication and service to humanity. To EE's surprise, he was also included in the list. He didn't expect it, but he already had a lot of votes from people, which quite surprised him as he didn't deem himself popular. What he didn't count was the many missions he had gone on and how he usually engaged people in conversations. He was always heartily willing to help others, and a lot of people both within and outside the MBO knew how easygoing he was. One evening, Gustav sat down with Endrik and EE to review the final list of potential council members. "These are some incredible people," EE remarked while scrolling through the list. "It's amazing to see how many talented and compassionate individuals are out there." Gustav nodded. "Unlike myself, this council has to made up of people who genuinely want to make a difference." The next day, Gustav stood in the grand hall of the temporary headquarters for the newly formed independent council. The room was spacious and modern, filled with natural light streaming through large windows. The atmosphere was a bit tense as the final round of candidate interviews was about to begin. He was flanked by a team of advisors, each one meticulously selected for their expertise in various fields. They had spent days sifting through the nominations, narrowing down the list to the most promising individuals. Today, Gustav would use his keen perception and ability to read others to interrogate the remaining candidates and finalize the council. As the first candidate stepped forward, Gustav gave a reassuring nod to his team. "Let's get started," he said with a calm but authoritative tone. The candidate was a middle-aged woman with a background in environmental science. She introduced herself confidently, her passion for sustainable development evident in her every word. Gustav listened intently, his sharp eyes catching every nuance of her demeanor. "Dr. Patel, what do you see as the biggest challenge in implementing a mandate that wouldn't discriminate against those with low-graded bloodline that have the capacity to work well in such fields?" Gustav asked, leaning forward slightly. Dr. Patel took a deep breath before answering. "The biggest challenge will be the political will and how to keep them safe when they engage in such energy research. The government might still be against it, so it will definitely require a lot of convincing to pass the bill. But I believe that's why we're here. We can really be the ones to make a difference." Gustav nodded, pleased with her answer. He could sense her sincerity and commitment. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. We'll be in touch." The next candidate was a young social worker named Aisha Kamara, who had been instrumental in several grassroots movements for education reform. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she spoke. "Gustav, I believe education is a major key to implementing and breaking a long cycle of unwarranted biases," Aisha said passionately. "If we can ensure that the children mentality is correct before they grow, we can avoid a lot of situations currently at play now. We can transform communities from the ground up since the society plays a huge part in grooming the personality of a child." Gustav smiled. "I agree, Aisha. What specific policies would you propose to make this a reality?" Aisha outlined a detailed plan, focusing on careful implemented teacher training and community involvement. One by one, the candidates came forward, each bringing their unique perspectives and expertise. Gustav's high perception allowed him to discern their true intentions, picking up on subtle cues that revealed their character. He weeded out those who seemed more interested in power than in serving the people, focusing instead on those whose hearts were truly in the right place. Among the candidates was EE, of course. He didn't need to interrogate EE, he knew exactly where his friend stood. EE's sense of justice and unwavering loyalty made him an obvious choice for the council. No matter how biased it may seem, Gustav wanted someone from his friend group to be amongst the candidates. If EE hadn't made the cut originally, he would have put Eldris in. After hours of rigorous interviews, Gustav and his team had their final list. 30 council members, each one vetted and chosen for their dedication, integrity, and expertise. Gustav stood before the gathered candidates. Congratulations to each of you. You have been chosen not just for your skills, but for your commitment to changing the world. Together, we will usher in a new era. The news of the council members' selection spread like wildfire. Media outlets around the globe reported on the historic event, highlighting the diverse backgrounds and expertise of the chosen individuals. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, with people expressing renewed hope for the future. The Grand Hall was soon packed with journalists and cameras, ready to broadcast the council members' first public appearance. Gustav stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of eager faces. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the members of the Independent Council, he began. Each of these individuals has been chosen for their dedication to justice, equality, and progress. They will be the voice of the voiceless, working tirelessly to address the challenges we face. One by one, the council members stepped forward to give their speeches. Dr. Patel was the first. We stand at a critical juncture in history. We are committed to pushing for the political will necessary to make changes where anyone can pursue research related to scientifical and energy experimentations. Aisha Kamara followed, her eyes shining with determination. Education is the foundation of a prosperous society. We will work to ensure that every child, regardless of their background, has access to everything they should. We will break the cycle of discrimination and unwarranted treatments and empower communities to thrive together. EE took the podium next, his presence commanding and resolute. Corruption and inequality have plagued our world for far too long. We will clamp down on the societal differences between low and high-graded mixed bloods. We will eradicate corruption in government and ensure that no one is silenced or unjustly persecuted. The speeches continued, each council member articulating their vision and commitment. As the last speech concluded, Gustav returned to the podium. This council represents a new beginning. We will work together to address the pressing issues of our time and build a future where justice, equality, and progress are the norm. Thank you for your support. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the Grand Hall. The world was watching, and the message was clear: change was coming. Over the next few days, the council members began their work in earnest. Meetings were held to outline their initial priorities, and subcommittees were formed to tackle specific issues. Gustav juggled his responsibilities with preparing for his postponed trip to Aegon. Once he had finished putting a couple of things in place, he would leave everything to the others and finally head for Aegon. Can you believe how far we've come? EE asked with a smile. From fighting our way through battles to now shaping the future of the world. Gustav nodded. It's surreal. Although, I don't care much for it, so you really have a lot of work ahead of you. As do you, haha. Get back in one piece. In fact, I'll be heading to Aegon with you and you cannot refuse, EE chuckled. The world is finally heading in the right direction, he added. Let's see if it survives long enough to become something better, Gustav voiced with a straight look. Days later in Plankton City, a battle was ongoing between two powerful forces. Boom, boom, boom. They met in midair multiple times with thunderous clashes. The force of their blow caused a shockwave that rippled through the atmosphere, shaking the nearby buildings. They landed on the rooftop of a deserted skyscraper, the ground beneath them cracking from the impact. Without a word, they continued exchanging powerful blows as their fists collided with enough force to create sonic booms. Chapter 1532 Leaving for Aegon. Chapter 1532 Leaving for Aegon. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The air around them seemed to tremble with each strike, and the ground beneath crumbled further. Not bad, Gustav, Jack grunted, his eyes gleaming with respect. You've truly gotten way stronger. Gustav smirked, dodging a particularly fierce punch. I had to, didn't I? With a mutual understanding, they launched themselves into the sky, heading for outer space where they could unleash their full strength without causing undue destruction on Earth. As they ascended, the city lights below them grew distant, replaced by the vast expanse of stars. In the weightlessness of space, they continued their battle. Their blows caused ripples in the fabric of the cosmos. Their physical strength alone was immense, each punch sending shockwaves that traveled across the void. They refrained from using any supernatural abilities, relying solely on their raw power. Let's see if you can keep up, Jack said, his voice in challenge as though he hadn't accepted the fact that Gustav was now the world's strongest. Gustav responded with a powerful right hook, sending Jack hurtling through space. Jack quickly recovered, charging back with equal force. They collided again, the impact causing a nearby star to shatter into fragments. Its light got extinguished in an instant. For what felt like hours, they battled relentlessly, neither gaining a clear advantage. Their physical strength seemed evenly matched. Finally, as they hovered amidst the wreckage of the destroyed star, Jack raised a hand. All right, Gustav. I acknowledge your strength. You're the real deal. Gustav nodded with a steady breathe despite the intensity of their fight. Thanks, Jack. They returned to Earth, landing back on the rooftop where their battle had begun. The night was still, the city below unaware of the epic clash that had just taken place above them. Jack leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. You've come a long way, Gustav. Although, I'd still like to say I'm stronger because I can sense you're not even an alpha-ranked mixed blood yet. I know you have abilities that could make anyone unable to move a muscle. Gustav pulled a small rounded button from his storage space and handed it to Jack. There's something you need to have. Jack took the button, examining it curiously. What's this? It's a data storage button, Gustav explained. Everything I've discovered so far about the Dark Plane, the Death Angels, and other things is stored within. I don't know when I'll return from the stagnant citrus void and I need to bring everyone up to speed on things I know. You all need to be prepared. Jack's expression grew serious as he kept the button away. I will make sure we are. Gustav nodded with a look of relief. They stood in silence for a moment before Jack finally broke the silence. How do you feel about everything that's happened recently? The council, the new responsibilities. It's a lot, but I've played my part and left the rest in the hands of trusted allies and subordinates. I leave for planet Aegon tomorrow, Gustav replied with a firm tone. Jack nodded thoughtfully. I'll hold things down while you're away. As the events surrounding Gustav settled, it was finally time for him to head back to Aegon. This time, his closest friends and allies Eildris, Falco, Angie, Endrik and even Vera decided to accompany him. Matilda had left already with Empress Daria, so they were unable to come with. They all gathered at the spaceship port where Gustav's spacecraft was parked. You know, you guys really don't have to, right? Gustav turned to stare at everyone while rolling his eyes. Grinned and patted Gustav on the back. Last time we let you face this alone, you ended up being unconscious for nearly 2 months. Let's go. Eildris nodded, his eyes serious. We're not backing out. Falco added, besides, we have to keep an eye on you and make sure you don't get into trouble without us. Angie smiled softly in response. Her horns had regrown to their full length at this point. She was back to full power, so she was ready for anything. Endrik, standing off to the side, gave a brief nod. Let's get this over with. With everyone aboard, the spaceship powered up, and they left Earth, heading towards Aegon. Upon arrival at Aegon, they were greeted by Ethereal, the ethereal guardian who had guided Gustav before. Welcome back, Gustav, Ethereal said, her voice like a gentle breeze. And welcome to your companions. Please, follow me. They were led through the intricate and beautiful pathways of Aegon, causing surprised gasps to escape the lips of the others hadn't been here before. The skies were a stunning teal, with clouds that looked like they were made of pure light. The landscape was dotted with crystalline structures and lush greenery that twinkled purely. Finally, they arrived at the grand chamber where Gustav had trained his 3-in-1 golden body. Miss Amy's projection awaited. In the center stood the holographic figure of Miss Amy, her presence as serene and commanding as ever. Welcome back, kiddo, Miss Amy's projection said. Are you prepared? Gustav stepped forward with a resolute expression. Miss Amy. I am prepared. Miss Amy's projection smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. You have grown so much, kid. Very well. Get ready to use the warp demolator. Gustav nodded while cladding himself with his sacred armor. The intricate, shimmering plates formed around his body, providing both protection and enhancing his abilities. He gave off a thrumming force that caused waves of disturbance across space. The void stepping boots materialized in his grasp and he proceeded to wear them as well. Ethereal led Gustav to a containment area that was heavily fortified and surrounded by intricate sigils and runes. In the center of this area was a pedestal, and on it rested the fragment of the warp demolator. The fragment was contained within a glowing, translucent field that seemed to buzz with immense power. Miss Amy's projection appeared beside Gustav. It is time. Gustav stepped forward and grabbed the containment before lifting it and heading out. He soon stood before everyone as the containment field of the warp demolator pulsated with an intense energy. They had all gathered on a plateau overlooking the vast, crystalline landscape of Aegon. Their faces were filled with mixed expressions because they knew this moment marked the beginning of a perilous journey for Gustav. Gustav turned to his friends, his eyes reflecting both determination and gratitude. Thank you all for being here. I don't know when I'll be back, but I promise to return. Take care of each other. EE stepped forward as his usual grin was replaced with a serious expression. You'd better come back, Gus. We're counting on you. Eldris placed a hand on Gustav's shoulder. Stay strong, and remember, we're always with you. Falco nodded solemnly. You just do your thing. I'll keep the others safe. Angie's eyes were filled with sadness. Be safe, she proceeded to hug him. Big brother, I've put an extra layer of protection around you. I can't try to see into the fates in order not to risk anything bad happening, so you have to be careful, Enrique cautioned with a look of concern. I'll try. No need to worry about me, Gustav ruffled his hair with a smile. Gustav proceeded to give them all one last look. Goodbye, everyone. With that, Gustav lifted the containment field higher as the immense power made the air around him vibrate. He ascended into the sky, causing the containment to glow brighter as he rose higher, leaving the planet's surface behind. His friends watched in silence, their hearts heavy but hopeful. As he reached the edge of Aegon's atmosphere, Gustav channeled his energy into the containment field. The field began to crack and splinter, beams of light shooting out in every direction. As he sped further and further, the containment cracked more. With a final surge of speed, the containment shattered, and the warp demolator was freed. The warp demolator fragment thrashed around wildly, its form shifting and expanding uncontrollably. Gustav activated his 3-in-1 golden body form at this moment, causing his entire being to glow with a divine radiance. The golden energy enveloped him, amplifying his strength and abilities to their peak. The warp demolator continued to grow. Its mass became humongous as it rushed into the depths of space. Gustav didn't hesitate, he blazed forward, causing his golden form leaving a trail of light in the dark void. Here goes nothing, Gustav muttered to himself as he pushed his speed to the limit, closing the distance between him and the warp demolator. The fragment was now an enormous entity, its energy pulsating with an almost sentient fury. Gustav maneuvered through the chaotic energy fields it emitted. As he drew closer, the warp demolator seemed to grow more haywire. Gustav gritted his teeth and pushed forward, the golden energy around him flaring brightly. Tuhushi Tilda with a burst of speed, Gustav flew directly into the heart of the warp demolator. Chapter 1533 Traveling Through the Warp Demolator. Chapter 1533 Traveling Through the Warp Demolator. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The energy around him immediately intensified, threatening to tear him apart despite the activation of his golden body underneath the sacred armor. He was engulfed in a maelstrom of chaotic energy. The rendering and contraction of the space-time continuum around him were almost overwhelming. He felt as if he were being pulled apart and compressed simultaneously, his very essence stretched across dimensions. One could imagine just how much crazier it would be if he didn't have the golden body and sacred armor. Stay focused, he muttered to himself, gritting his teeth against the intense forces. His golden body glowed fiercely, acting as a shield against the tumultuous energy. The warp demolator surged forward with incredible speed, swallowing up all the orbital bodies in its path. Asteroids, debris, and even smaller celestial bodies were consumed. Some of the smaller and less tugger ones were immediately disintegrated into nothingness within the warp demolator's chaotic interior. Gustav could feel the immense power of the phenomenon, its hunger insatiable and its force unstoppable. Suddenly, he felt a shift in the warp demolator's trajectory. It was aiming for planet Aegon. No! Gustav shouted, his voice echoing through the warp demolator's core. He could sense the planet in the distance. His friends were down there, watching, unaware of the imminent danger. Angie, Falco, Eldris, and Rhea stood on a high plateau on Aegon, their eyes fixed on the sky. They saw the warp demolator approaching. Its massive, ashy sand-like form was no doubt an overwhelming view. Their expressions immediately turned wary. "What's happening?" Angie asked, her voice filled with worry. Falco narrowed his eyes as dark energy swirled around him. "It's coming straight for us." They all channeled their bloodline, ready to make a move despite knowing how dangerous the warp demolator was. Gustav was not about to let things get that dangerous. He put his golden body in full gear, sending radiant energy surging through the warp demolator. With a tremendous effort, Gustav steered the gargantuan entity away from Aegon from its interior. The warp demolator resisted, its chaotic nature fighting against his control, but Gustav's determination was unyielding. He channeled all his strength into guiding the warp demolator's path, pulling it away from the planet and into the vastness of space. "Come on," Gustav growled as his body strained under the immense pressure. The warp demolator veered off course and its trajectory shifted away from Aegon before Gustav lost control of it. The planet was spared, the danger averted, but the effort left had taken quite the energy from Gustav's golden body. He floated within the warp demolator and his golden body flickered he struggled to maintain its activation. On the surface of Aegon, his friends watched in awe as the warp demolator changed direction. "He did it," Angie whispered in relief. Falco nodded as a rare smile crossed his face. "I knew he would." Let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We were almost toast." Eldris' eyes never left the sky. "Stay safe, Gustav." Within the warp demolator, Gustav did his best to stabilize his golden body form and finally managed to. "Okay," Gustav said to himself with a steady tone. "Let's see where this takes us." The warp demolator continued to move forward, its speed unmatched by any known force. Gustav could feel the space-time continuum bending and shifting, the boundaries between dimensions becoming thin. He floated within the warp demolator, surrounded by an endless expanse of white lines that stretched infinitely in all directions. It was as if he was suspended in a void of pure dim, with no sense of up or down, no sense of time or space. The warp demolator's chaotic energy swirled around him as its destructive force constantly tried to tear him apart. "Focus," he muttered to himself, causing his voice to echo in the vast emptiness. His sacred armor glowed with a bluish light as its protective barrier shielded his physical form from the warp demolator's relentless assault. Yet, the pressure was immense, almost unbearable. The warp demolator's energy pressed against him from all sides, a crushing force that would have obliterated any ordinary being. But Gustav was no ordinary being. He could feel the warp demolator attacking his mental state, trying to rip his mind apart. Whispers echoed in the back of his consciousness, dark and malevolent, attempting to break his focus and sanity. He clenched his fists, causing the golden glow of his 3-in-1 golden body to intensify. The golden light emanating from his body pushed back the mental assaults, creating a barrier that shielded his mind. The whispers grew fainter, then disappeared altogether, unable to penetrate his mental defenses. Next, he felt millions of invisible hands reaching for his soul, trying to grasp and tear it from his body. The sensation was chilling, like icy fingers brushing against the core of his being. But the golden light surrounding him flared brighter, repelling the spectral hands. "You're not getting my soul, either," Gustav declared. For what felt like an eternity, Gustav drifted through the endless lines of white, the warp demolator's energy constantly testing his limits. The light surrounding him flickered and pulsed in resilience. He knew he had to keep moving forward because he hadn't gotten to where he had to go. Gustav felt as though he was swimming through an ocean of time, with waves crashing against him from every direction. The warp demolator continued its relentless assault on his senses, but his golden body held firm as a beacon of stability in the chaos. The lines of white around him twisted and turned, creating a mesmerizing yet disorienting dance. Miss Amy wasn't kidding, Gustav muttered to himself. Time really has no meaning here. He pushed forward, determined to reach the stagnant citrus void. His perception of time was becoming distorted. Moments stretching into what felt like years, yet his golden body remained intact. He knew that despite the disorienting journey, he hadn't yet reached the 30-minute limit of his golden body form. As he flew, he began to see strange and wondrous sights. Hundreds of versions of himself appeared alongside him, each one moving in perfect synchrony. It was as if he was looking into a mirror that reflected countless possibilities, each one a different path he could have taken. "This is insane," Gustav said in amazement. "Are these alternate versions of me?" The hundreds of Gustavs moved in unison, their golden bodies shimmering with the same radiant light. It was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. As he continued, the scene shifted again. Flickering images of the universe being formed and destroyed played out before him like a cosmic slideshow. He watched as stars were born in brilliant explosions of light, only to collapse into black holes that devoured everything in their path. Galaxies spun and collided, creating breathtaking displays of cosmic power and destruction. "It's like everything is all happening at once," Gustav whispered. He felt a profound sense of insignificance as he witnessed these grand events. The warp demolator was showing him the very essence of existence, the endless cycle of birth and death that defined the universe. Despite the overwhelming nature of these visions, Gustav remained focused on his goal. "Don't pay any heed to these, you have to reach the void," Gustav said to himself. As he pressed on, the white lines around him began to change. They grew thicker and more vibrant, pulsating with a strange energy that resonated with his golden body. Gustav could feel the pressure increasing. The warp demolator's attempts to break him was growing more intense. Despite the overwhelming experience, he remained calm, his senses sharp and his will unwavering. He had been traveling through the warp demolator for what felt like centuries, yet his golden body had sustained him, keeping him grounded in the present. How did Miss Amy know that this is exactly what I'd experience? Gustav wondered aloud. He recalled how she had detailed a lot of the things he was currently experiencing in here and found it suspicious. What else does she know that she hasn't told me? The thought lingered in his mind, but he pushed it aside. Now was not the time for this. He had to stay focused on the task at hand. As he ventured deeper into the void, the surroundings began to change. The soft, radiant light gave way to a network of intricate, glowing roots that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. Each root pulsated with a vibrant energy, intertwining and branching off into countless paths. "These must be some sort of time roots," Gustav murmured as his eyes traced the complex patterns. The roots pulsed rhythmically as their energy flowed like the lifeblood of the universe. Gustav marveled at the sheer scale of it, the interconnectedness of all things laid bare before him. He reached out, his fingers brushing against one of the roots. Instantly, a flood of images and sensations washed over him. Scenes from distant pasts and possible futures flashed before his eyes. He saw ancient civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, and the endless dance of creation and destruction that defined the cosmos. Remarkable, he whispered in the heart of this loneliness. Chapter 1534 Arriving at the Stagnant Citrus Void. Chapter 1534 Arriving at the Stagnant Citrus Void. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The warp demolator continued carrying Gustav forward non-stop. The journey felt endless and the routes stretching on and on for what seemed like centuries. Gustav always reminded himself to stay calm and focus. His golden body would have deactivated if he had stayed in for longer than 30 minutes. As his frame got pushed in deeper, the roots began to glow brighter. Gustav could feel the pull of the void, a subtle but powerful force guiding him toward a central point. He followed the current, his instincts leading him through the ever-expanding network. Hours turned into days, days into months, and months into years. Or so it seemed. In reality, less than 30 minutes had passed since he entered the warp demolator, but the distortion of time within the void made it feel like an eternity. His journey through the roots continued, and sometimes the glowing tendrils weaved a kind of time web around him. He could sense the presence of countless moments in time. He had been carried along this path for what felt like an eternity, but yet it kept going. The pressure on his body, mind, and soul was immense, but he had managed to endure it so far. However, a growing sense of unease gnawed at him. The strain on his golden body was becoming more pronounced with each passing moment, and he could feel his energy reserves depleting. If the golden body came undone now, it would spell his end within the warp demolator's relentless, destructive currents. Could it have been up to 30 minutes already? He wondered to himself. However, since he knew well that deactivation would spell his end, he had to do whatever it took to keep it going. Gustav had been relying on the warp demolator's momentum to carry him, but now he realized he needed to take matters into his own hands. With a determined expression, he tried to move forward, pushing against the invisible currents that bound him. It felt like moving through something incredibly sticky, each inch of progress requiring immense effort. Damn it, he grunted as his muscles strained against the resistance. Why is it so hard to move in here? Unbeknownst to Gustav, the warp demolator had its own set of laws that incapacitated movement unless it was implemented by its own flow. His attempts to move at his highest speed were met with frustrating resistance. He managed to push himself about 20 feet before he had to stop. His body trembled with exertion. "This isn't working," he said while panting heavily. "If I don't find a way to move faster, I'll run out of time." Gustav closed his eyes, trying to focus his thoughts. He had to find a way to harness enough power in the warp demolator to propel him forward. The golden body was strong, but even it had its limits. He needed to think creatively and speed up his travel time lest he ends up meeting his end in here. He suddenly looked down at the greenish and red boots on his feet. Perhaps I should try it. But I need to be careful not to send myself out of the warp demolator by mistake, Gustav thought as he sent energy to the boots on his feet. He felt the pressure of the warp demolator recede momentarily as the void stepping boots began to glow with an intense light. A surge of power coursed through his legs, and the moment he tried taking a step forward, his body vanished. In an instant, Gustav found himself cutting across the warp demolator with a speed faster than teleportation. It was as if the very fabric of space and time folded around him, propelling him through the warp demolator's currents with unimaginable velocity. This level of movement shouldn't have been possible, but it was happening. He reappeared somewhere deep within the warp demolator, surrounded by even larger roots that represented time and white lines that stretched across a vast area. Determined to continue, Gustav repeated the process of moving. The void stepping boots activated once more, and he vanished, only to reappear further within the warp demolator. Each step took him deeper, the surroundings becoming more surreal and otherworldly. As he took steps forward, he could feel the boots working in tandem with his golden body, amplifying his speed and agility. The combination of the two allowed him to navigate the treacherous terrain of the warp demolator with ease. The roots and white lines around him grew even larger, intertwining in complex patterns that seemed to defy logic. The sight was mesmerizing. "This place is like a maze," he remarked as his eyes scanned the intricate web of roots and lines. He took another step, and the void stepping boots activated again. This time, the speed was even greater, and he felt a sensation akin to being stretched and compressed simultaneously. It was disorienting, but he maintained his focus, reappearing in yet another part of the warp demolator. He took yet another step, and the boots propelled him forward once more. The surroundings blurred, and he felt himself moving through layers of reality, each one more intense than the last. The roots and white lines became a blur of light and motion, and he could feel he was getting close. As Gustav moved deeper into the warp demolator, the roots around him began to branch off in various directions. When this happened, he stopped using the boots and let warp demolator's current push him forward naturally. His surroundings became increasingly intricate, the roots and white lines forming a complex web that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of time itself. "This place is like a living organism," Gustav murmured. He soon arrived at an intersecting path within the warp demolator. The roots diverged into two separate directions, one path veered left, and the other went right. Gustav could only slow his movements, not stop them entirely, so he had to make a quick decision. Left or right, he wondered out loud. Which way leads to the stagnant citrus void? All the time he had spent in here, Gustav had been dragged alongside orbital bodies. Moons, planets and even stars has been his companions here. He would have made use of the direction they were being pulled off in to make a choice, but from the look of things, some were pulled left and others right. He couldn't make his decision based off the direction the orbital bodies were being dragged in. Gustav suddenly recalled the words of Commander Urgril of the Tarks Force. He had once mentioned something about the other time candidate message saying he should go left. Could this be what he was referring to? Gustav felt this had to be it. Otherwise it made no sense. "All right, Urgril. I hope you're right about this." He willed himself to move left. The void stepping boots glowed, propelling him forward and towards the left with incredible speed. The left path seemed to narrow as he progressed. The roots closed in around him, forming a tunnel-like structure. "This feels different," Gustav noted while his eyes scanned the surroundings. Unlike the other times, he didn't feel as much pressure. He only felt more pull. The warp demolator continuously pushed Gustav through the left path, and soon he was back in an area where it was all just white lines. Gustav hoped he had made the right choice and activated the void stepping boots again. He burst forward with the speed of the void stepping boots. The path began to close up again, narrowing and constricting, which forced him to navigate with precision since he didn't want to end up outside of the warp demolator by mistake until he reached the end of the path. Just a bit further, Gustav's eyes narrowed in focus. He surged ahead, causing the void stepping boots to glow with each step, propelling him forward with unprecedented speed. The white lines became a blur around him, and he could feel the energy intensifying. It was as if the warp demolator itself was urging him to continue, pushing him toward his destination. Suddenly, the path opened up into a vast expanse, and Gustav found himself at the end, which happened to look like the mouth of a large beast. The beast's maw yawned open, revealing rows of jagged teeth and an abyss beyond. Before he could react, the beast swallowed him whole, and everything went dark. "Shit!" Gustav voiced trailed off as he unleashed more power from his golden body form, hoping to fight his way out. Unfortunately, the darkness was impenetrable. He felt himself being pulled deeper and deeper until he was drifting away in an endless void. Gustav found himself in a surrounding filled with debris. Floating rocks and orbital bodies marked with destruction were scattered across the place. When Gustav looked around properly, he could see an uncountable lineup of planets around him. This was the stagnant citrus void, a part of outer space in the future that didn't exist in Gustav's time yet. Chapter 1535 Landing on a Familiar Planet. Chapter 1535 Landing on a Familiar Planet. Author's note. Unedited chapter. A lot of these planets were either shells of their former selves or their surfaces destroyed and marked with dark scorches. "This place," Gustav muttered, "it's like a graveyard of worlds. What happened here?" He floated amidst the celestial ruins, his golden body glowing faintly in the oppressive darkness. The planets, though numerous, all seemed lifeless. Some were mere husks, their surfaces cracked and barren. Others bore the scars of unimaginable battles, their landscapes torn apart by forces beyond comprehension. There is no doubt about it. This is the stagnant citrus void, Gustav voiced, a void in time and space where the echoes of destruction linger. He could feel the void drawing every essence of happiness within him, like there was an invisible force around. It was as if the very fabric of this place fed on despair, amplifying the emptiness and sorrow of its surroundings. I'll have to be careful even here, Gustav realized. If I lose myself here, I'll never find what I'm looking for. He glanced around, taking in the sight of thousands of abandoned and majorly destroyed planets. Gustav knew he had to find out which one was planet Humbad. Miss Amy said this wouldn't be easy, he recalled. She must have known about the mental and emotional toll this place would take. Quite terrifying. He floated towards one of the closer planets, examining its surface. The planet was covered in deep fissures, with molten lava seeping from its core. The air was thick with ash, and the landscape was littered with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. This isn't it, Gustav thought. Planet Humbad. How do I tell which one it is when most of them look the same? He moved on to the next planet, a desolate wasteland with no signs of life. The ground was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the sky was a perpetually dark, stormy grey. Lightning crackled in the distance, illuminating the barren terrain. Another dead world, he muttered. How many more of these are there? He continued his search, moving from one planet to the next. Each one told a story of devastation, of once great civilizations reduced to ruins. The further he went, the heavier the weight of the void pressed upon him. This void. Depsite my powerful mental fortitude. It's starting to make me feel despaired, Gustav realized. This wasn't a new feeling to him, but he hadn't felt such since over 4 years ago before he got the system. The golden body was dimming, and once it got completely deactivated he wouldn't be able to reactivate it anytime soon, so he had to prepare to tackle the oppressiveness of the citrus void without its help. His mind raced with thoughts and memories, trying to piece together any clues that might lead him to his destination. Humbad, he thought. Did Miss Amy leave any hints as to how we'll locate it amidst all of these? There has to be a way to identify it, he reasoned. Finding planet Humbad was going to be a Herculean task. There were moons, dead stars, and many orbital bodies around as well. It looked like every essence of life was being absorbed by the stagnant citrus void. Gustav floated among the debris, his golden glow dimming more before he finally decided to deactivate it to conserve energy. The oppressive force of the void wave increased, making every movement feel laborious. It really is like a black hole for life, he muttered, gazing at the desolate expanse around him. I need to find Humbad quickly before this void drains me completely. He started by spreading his perception out. Although his golden body was deactivated, his perception was still capable of spreading across a very wide range. Gustav focused, sending out tendrils of his awareness to explore the surrounding space. As his perception extended, he felt the void pushing back and drawing his energy away. The stagnant citrus void seemed to be actively resisting his efforts to probe its depths. Miss Amy warned me about this, Gustav thought, gritting his teeth. I can't afford to waste energy here. Every bit counts. He retracted his perception, feeling the strain of the void's pull. It was like trying to move through quicksand, each attempt sapping more of his strength. She said there are threats in the stagnant citrus void. I can't let my guard down, Gustav recalled Miss Amy's words. After searching through for many minutes, he floated in place for a moment, considering his options. The planets, moons, and dead stars around him were numerous. Each planet he encountered was in a similar state of decay, making it nearly impossible to identify which one was planet Humbad. Anyone could be planet Humbad. However, searching them all individually would be impossible. He needed a more efficient method. This place is even worse than I imagined, he muttered, looking at the countless celestial bodies strewn around like discarded toys. Is the warp demolator responsible, or did something else happen? He wondered out loud. I need to make sure this never happens. The void was eerily silent, the only sounds being the occasional creaks and groans of crumbling planetary fragments. Gustav tried to spread his perception again, but it was like trying to push through molasses. The void seemed to resist his every effort, pulling his energy away. Since he still hadn't discovered a way to efficiently locate planet Humbad, his only option remained checking the planets. With incredible speed, he moved cautiously from planet to planet. Gustav made use of the void stepping boots to close in light-years distances in just an instant. Planet Humbad has to be here somewhere. He had to keep his determination alive or the void would eat it away. The void seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of destruction and decay. As he floated past another ruined world, he felt a pang of sadness. He flew towards it and landed on its surface. Gustav took a deep breath, feeling the strange air of the demolished planet fill his lungs. The familiarity of the place tugged at his memory, though he couldn't quite place it. The surface of the planet was a desolate wasteland, with scorched grounds and blackened structures marking the scars of ancient battles. Deep holes pockmarked the landscape, some still smoldering with the remnants of past fires. Is this it? Is this planet Humbad? He wondered aloud with an uncertain tone. He had explored countless planets already, each one a shell of its former self, and he knew this one could be just another dead end. Yet, something about this place felt different. The familiarity. His void-stepping boots had been a blessing and a curse. The ability to traverse hundreds of light years in a single step was extraordinary, but it also made it easy to overshoot his destinations. Learning to control them was difficult, but he had become more adept with each use. Gustav took another cautious step forward, his eyes scanning the ruined landscape. The remnants of buildings, some still towering despite the destruction, loomed over him. He walked through what seemed to have been a city square, now a barren wasteland with only the skeletal remains of structures hinting at its former glory. This place, it feels like I've been here before, he thought. He continued to walk, the crunch of debris under his boots the only sound in the eerie silence. As he moved deeper into the ruined city, he noticed that the destruction here seemed more concentrated, more deliberate. It wasn't just the random chaos of a natural disaster, it was the calculated devastation of a war zone. What could have happened? His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the damage. He came across a particularly deep hole, its edges charred and jagged. Peering into its depths, he saw a red glow emanating from below. SS Gustav explored the surroundings more and made a few discoveries. He saw a massive circular structure, cracked and nearly completely crumbled at a particular area that looked like it used to be a road. Gustav inspected it, causing his suspicion to grow the more he looked around. Soon, he recognized the planet to be Earth and couldn't hide his shock. He stood on what used to be Plankton City, now buried under ash and darkness. Does this mean? Gustav knew Earth was still okay back where he was coming from, so what exactly did this mean? As he continued exploring, a dark, large shadowy hand phased out of the ground and headed for him. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A burst of milky-colored light surrounded him as Gustav immediately used atomic disintegration to rip through the shadowy hand. What was that? Gustav wondered but didn't get more time to contemplate as dark mist suddenly phased out of the ground. The hand reformed and went after Gustav again. The moment contact was made, part of Gustav's flesh turned dark. Gustav hadn't seen this coming and his perception was slower than usual due to the void. He gritted his teeth against the pain while jumping backwards multiple times to leave a wide distance between himself and the arm. However, another shadowy arm suddenly phased out from the ground right behind him. Chapter 1536 Getting Close. Chapter 1536 Getting Close. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav reactivated his golden body form in time, causing a radiant light to envelop him. The hand that had lunged at him burned upon contact, forcing the shadowy hand to shrink away. Gustav's darkened flesh also returned to its natural state, but Gustav could feel the lingering effects of the encounter. What was that thing? He wondered once more. Gustav had destroyed it before and yet it returned, so he wasn't sure it was gone for good even after getting rid of it again. His instincts proved correct when he was attacked again, this time by multiple shadowy hands emerging from the ground. They moved with eerie coordination, each one trying to latch onto him and spread their corruption. Gustav unleashing a powerful burst of energy that disintegrated the hands. But even as they fell apart, they began to reform, their dark essence refusing to be vanquished. Gustav continuously did his best to escape physical contact with the shadowy hands. Using his atomic disintegration, he managed to temporarily dissipate many of them, but they always reformed, no matter what he did. Acquisition has been activated. Gustav activated acquisition to see if it could be of any help in this situation. Unfortunately, nothing happened. The hands still came at him. Gustav guessed that these hands didn't count as beings with supernatural abilities. Realizing that his efforts were futile, Gustav decided to flee the surroundings and leave the shadowy entities alone for now. This isn't getting me anywhere, he thought with a slight look of frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. I need to find out more about what's going on here. Gustav activated his void stepping boots again, vanishing from the spot and reappearing on the other side of the planet. He continued to explore the decomposed remains of what used to be Earth. As he moved through the ruins, he saw more of the dark shadowy entities. Some took the form of hands, like the one that attacked him earlier, while others appeared as amorphous blobs of darkness that seemed to absorb all light around them. They moved sluggishly as if they were drawn to any semblance of life or energy. These things are everywhere, Gustav muttered to himself, watching one of the shadowy blobs engulf a piece of debris, turning it into darkened ash. What could have caused this? How did Earth, and possibly other planets, end up like this? He continued to their eyes as he moved. Could this be the after effects of that? Gustav had a number of guesses, but his mind main hinged on a particular one. His thoughts were interrupted by another shadowy hand emerging from the ground. He quickly void-stepped away, avoiding contact and reappearing a safe distance from the entity. I can't let them touch me again. He decided to explore other planets in the surrounding void, hoping to find more clues. Using his void stepping boots, he began to traverse the vast expanse of space, moving from one desolate planet to another. Each one bore the same signs of destruction and shadowy infestation. Their surfaces were scorched and marked with deep craters. Every planet is the same, he observed, standing on the surface of a particularly large planet. It's like a plague has swept through this entire region, leaving nothing but darkness and decay in its wake. As he explored, he noticed that the shadowy entities varied in form and behavior. Some were aggressive, like the hands that had attacked him, while others seemed more passive, simply existing in their darkened state. He also observed that the entities seemed to be drawn to any source of light or energy, which explained why they had attacked him. I can't waste any more time, he thought as his eyes scanned the desolate landscape. I need to find Planet Humbad. Gustav had looked around enough to get a general idea of what caused all of this, but this was the future. It hadn't happened yet and there was still hope. What he needed to do now more than ever was find Planet Humbad, but the problem of which direction to head in remained. He suddenly got an idea and opened the system panel. From the system panel, he decided to check his 5 years quests. Or specifically, the one he hadn't completed yet. Locate Dimension 6 on Planet Humbad, progress, 89, 100%. Gustav noticed that the percentage fluctuated as he moved. He took a step toward the west, watching the progress decrease to 89.5%. Turning to the northeast, the percentage climbed back up to 89.15%. Northeast it is, he muttered to himself while taking off into the air with a burst of speed. The void stepping boots activated, propelling him forward with incredible velocity. He flew through the stagnant citrus void, causing the remnants of destroyed planets and moons to blur past him. The journey was arduous, with Gustav encountering more of the dark, shadowy entities along the way. They seemed to be drawn to his presence, reaching out with their tendrils in an attempt to ensnare him. Despite the burst of speed from the void stepping boots, which gave him the ability to travel hundreds of light years in just an instant, he would still encounter the shadowy entities. They are everywhere. Gustav noticed that sometimes they even appeared in space, above the decimated planets. He flew over the charred remains of what had once been thriving cities, now nothing more than crumbling ruins swallowed by darkness. Each new planet he encountered seemed to share the same fate, a grim reminder of the void's corrupting influence. As he flew, Gustav kept an eye on the system panel, monitoring the progress percentage. It was slow, but it was increasing, guiding him ever closer to his goal. Gustav felt like he had been moving for hours already, but who knew if this part of space was bound by the normal laws of time? For all he knew, it could have been months already. Nevertheless, he kept soaring through the stagnant citrus void. His focus remained steadfast on the system panel in his vision, the progress bar slowly creeping upwards. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress, 98, 100%, just a bit more, Gustav muttered to himself, his voice barely audible in the vacuum of space. As the percentage reached 98, Gustav's surroundings began to distort. He found himself caught in a peculiar phenomenon. The fabric of space-time seemed to twist and ripple around him. Every time he surged forward, he was inexplicably transported to a different location within the void. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress, 95, 100%, what is this? Gustav frowned, attempting to comprehend the nature of this spatial anomaly. He tried again, using his lightning blitz to increase his speed, hoping to break through whatever was hindering his progress. In a flash, he found himself somewhere else, the scenery unchanged but the coordinates different. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress, 94, 100%. The progress percentage reduction was particularly frustrating. No matter what I do, it's the same result, Gustav muttered. He paused for a moment, hovering in the void, and pondered his situation. If the direct approach isn't working, perhaps there's another way. Gustav decided to try a different tactic. He reached out with his perception, extending it as far as he could within the constraints of the stagnant citrus void. Despite the oppressive environment, he focused on sensing any anomalies or disturbances that might explain the warping space. Unfortunately, he couldn't really pick up on much, but he could tell that the spatial anomaly was like a wall that extended far deep into the stagnant citrus void. One thing he knew about walls was that they always had an end. With this thought in mind, Gustav decided to go around it. The void stepping boots glowed and he took a step forward. 3 he instantly reappeared, 5,000 light-years away from his initial position. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress, 91, 100%. The progress percentage had reduced by so much, but Gustav could still sense the spatial anomaly around, so he stepped forward once more. 3 this time he reappeared, 10,000 light-years away. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress, 84, 100%. Gustav couldn't sense the spatial anomaly anymore and immediately turned to the side before surging forward with speed. He inputted more energy into the void stepping boots this time and crossed a distance of more than 10,000 light-years in a single second. Fortunately, he was not sent reeling back this time. Progress, 92, 10%. He let out a sigh of relief after seeing the progression. He was on the right track. He continued forward, watching the percentage steadily climb. Almost there, Gustav thought. He kept pushing forward, and soon, he found himself in an area where planets were few and far between. The void seemed to stretch endlessly, but there was a subtle difference in the atmosphere. As Gustav moved further, the number of planets in the surroundings kept reducing. Chapter 1537 Reaching Planet Humbad. Chapter 1537 Reaching Planet Humbad. Author's note. Unedited chapter. As Gustav moved further, the number of planets in the surroundings kept reducing. The percentage on his quest readout steadily increased, reaching 99.5%. In the distance, he saw a planet unlike any other he had encountered in this desolate region. The planet's surface was marked by a massive hole that covered about 35% of its entirety, glowing with the ominous red of bubbling magma. Gustav knew immediately that this had to be planet Humbad. He surged forward at incredible speed, his focus entirely on his destination. However, his rapid approach was abruptly halted. 2 massive dark hands appeared, seemingly materializing out of the planet itself. A colossal being emerged from behind the planet, its size dwarfing even the largest celestial bodies. This creature was at least 6 times the size of planet Humbad, with its form shrouded in shadow and darkness. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and its body was covered in scales that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid shadow. Huge, ragged wings extended from its back, adding to its terrifying presence. Gustav barely had time to react before one of the massive shadowy claws swiped at him. Instinctively, he dodged with a burst of speed from his void stepping boots, narrowly avoiding the destructive swipe. The force of the claw's movement caused shockwaves that rippled through the void, distorting space and time. Drawing upon his vast array of abilities, Gustav launched an offensive maneuver. He raised his hand, and a surge of atomic disintegration energy flowed from his fingertips. The milky white energy streaked towards the massive creature, aiming to break through its dark form. The beam collided with the creature's chest, creating a hole that was incredibly large, but just like mist, the hole soon covered up. The creature roared in pain and anger, swiping its other claw at Gustav. He narrowly avoided it again, moving with lightning speed. However, the creature was relentless. It continued to attack, each swipe faster and more ferocious than the last. Gustav was able to evade its attack and continuously rip through it with his own counterattack, but despite that, the creature remained relentless. The dark shadowy being's massive swipes sent forth storming winds and rifts of energy that threatened to obliterate anything in their path. Gustav recognized the imminent danger and quickly unleashed Cohelia. Multicolored layers of rhombus-shaped lights phased out from his body, forming a gigantic hole that swallowed up the attack entirely. The dark being, now fully revealed, was a towering monstrosity, at least 6 times the size of planet Humbad. Its body was a swirling mass of darkness, with shadowy claws that seemed to absorb the light around them. Its eyes, which were like glowing red orbs, the size of a moon, locked onto Gustav with malevolent intent. Gustav knew that using his most powerful attacks directly could risk damaging planet Humbad and possibly destroying it completely, so he had to be careful. He needed to get the dark being away if he wanted to use Cohelia to consume it. As the creature prepared for another attack, Gustav launched himself towards it, weaving through the air with lightning speed. The dark being swiped again. Its claws cut through space, causing streaks of destruction to sweep across the environment. Gustav dodged, but even the near miss sent shockwaves through his body. He gritted his teeth, realizing the sheer power of his opponent. This is getting problematic, he thought. Gustav summoned SJ with a thought, and it knew what to do. SJ emitted a bright glow before transforming into a replica of the dark being. The two entities stood face to face, mirroring each other. One could tell that the original was quite shocked. Gustav commanded the SJ to move far away from planet Humbad with a plan in his mind. With a roar, the dark being sent forth more attacks forward while Gustav did his best to evade. He followed SJ with incredible speed, causing them to head farther and farther away from planet Humbad. Gustav gathered his strength, preparing Cohelia for a decisive blow. As the SJ moved further away, Gustav positioned himself strategically. Now, he whispered while focusing all his energy into Cohelia. The SJ, sensing Gustav's command, suddenly exchanged places with the dark being. In a split second, the real dark being found itself far from planet Humbad, facing a fully unleashed Cohelia. Gustav unleashed the multicolored energy with a force that shook the very fabric of space. Cohelia rhombus-shaped lights glowed intensely as it expanded, engulfing the enormous dark being. The creature let out a deafening roar, thrashing wildly, but Cohelia continued to swallow it. Gustav watched intently in silent awe. The dark being's resistance was formidable, but Cohelia's consuming power was relentless. The swirling mass of darkness was soon completely swallowed up within the multicolored lights. "You're done," Gustav muttered. The remnants of the shadowy energy dissipated, leaving nothing but the vast emptiness of space. Gustav took a deep breath before turning his attention back to planet Humbad. The massive hole, which was red like live magma, still bubbled ominously on its surface. Gustav knew his mission wasn't over yet. He had to find Dimension 6 and complete his quest. Gustav descended towards the planet with his senses on high alert. He felt a mix of anticipation and wariness as he hovered above the desolate surface of planet Humbad. The sight before him was haunting, vast stretches of land marred by craters, smoking fissures, and scorched earth. It was clear that this planet had seen immense devastation, with no signs of any remaining structures or signs of civilization. The massive hole covering 35% of the planet's surface was quite visible. Its center casted an eerie light across the surroundings. Gustav landed softly, causing his boots to crunch against the cracked ground. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and ash. He retrieved SJ and it floated before him. He rubbed its surface affectionately before it vanished. The percentage on his system display read 99.9%. Almost there. All he needed to do now was find Dimension 6. Gustav activated his perception, spreading it out in all directions, seeking any clues about Dimension 6. Suddenly, he detected a faint but distinct life force nearby. His eyes widened in surprise. "There's someone here," he muttered to himself, astonished. The life force felt powerful and ancient, far from ordinary. Gustav began to move cautiously with his senses on high alert. He flew over the devastated landscape, following the life force. The terrain was challenging, with jagged rocks and deep crevices making it difficult to navigate. The closer he got, the stronger the life force became. As he approached the source, Gustav descended into a massive crater. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped the area. The crater itself was the size of multiple cities combined, so he still kept flying forward. The desolate environment stretched out before Gustav, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and eerie silence. The air was thick with the remnants of a once thriving civilization, now reduced to rusting metal and crumbling structures. A strange energy lingered in the atmosphere. Gustav navigated through the debris, his senses heightened as he followed the faint signal of a living presence. The sky above was a sickly shade of purple, streaked with ominous clouds that hinted at a storm brewing in the distance. As he ventured deeper into the heart of the ruins, the outline of a colossal structure began to take shape on the horizon. There, in the middle of a decayed mechanical ring that once served as a transportation hub, stood a feminine figure in all-white attire. The ring, though ancient and broken, still exuded a faint glow, remnants of the technology that had powered it. This feminine figure had an almost ethereal. Her ash-colored hair cascaded down her back in waves, catching the muted light and giving her an divine glow. She was clad in a flowing dress that clung to her curvy hips and accentuated her slender waist. Her skin was flawless, a soft porcelain that seemed untouched by the harsh environment around her. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet that sparkled with warmth as they met Gustav's. "Well, if it isn't my favorite troublemaker," a smile spread across her unfathomably beautiful face as she spoke. Gustav felt a rush of emotions at this moment. "Miss Amy," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "So you've been here all this time? I've been waiting for you," her melodic voice rang out. He closed the distance between them, and they embraced in a passionate hug that conveyed the depth of their connection. For a moment, the desolate surroundings faded away, and it was just the two of them, reunited at last. "Everything makes sense now," Gustav said, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. "This is why you knew so much about the warp demolator and what I needed to do." Miss Amy nodded in affirmation. "You're not wrong, but there's more to it." Chapter 1538 Catching Up with Miss Amy. Chapter 1538 Catching Up with Miss Amy. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The embrace between Miss Amy and Gustav was warm and familiar. For a moment, the bleak surroundings seemed to vanish, replaced by the comfort of their reunion. Gustav felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't realized just how much he missed her. When they finally pulled apart, Miss Amy scrutinized him with her sharp gaze. "You've gotten bigger," she remarked with a tone of surprise. "What have they been feeding you? You almost look like a grown-up now." Gustav chuckled. "And you, Miss Amy, look a little shorter now." Miss Amy pulled his cheeks with a peal of light laughter. "You cheeky little. I can't believe you're here." "Everything makes sense now," Gustav said while pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. This is why you knew so much about the warp demolator and what I needed to do. Miss Amy nodded in affirmation. You're not wrong, but there's more to it. There is. Gustav had a look of curiosity on his face. I'll tell you everything, but before that, bring me up to speed on everything that has happened so far, kiddo, Miss Amy said with a smile. The landscape of the desolate planet stretched out before them. It was a bleak expanse marked by destruction and chaos. The ground was pockmarked with deep craters, each one glowing with a magma-like light at the bottom, casting an eerie, reddish glow across the barren terrain. The sky above was a perpetual twilight, heavy with dark clouds that seemed to choke out any hope of sunlight. Not like there was any in the stagnant citrus void. They were standing at the center of a decayed technological ring, a relic of a once sophisticated transport system now reduced to rusted and twisted metal. The scent of ash and decay lingered around. Gustav adjusted his jacket, its edges singed and worn from his travels. He looked at Miss Amy, who seemed almost out of place in this environment, her presence a beacon of familiarity and strength. The ground around was a desolate expanse of charred, jagged rocks. They made their way towards a particular position. They found a spot to sit, a flat rock that offered a somewhat comfortable perch. Gustav began recounting everything that had happened in Miss Amy's absence. He started from the moment he became a fugitive on Earth. He told her about the false accusations, the solo objectives he had to accomplish, and his struggle on the run avoiding manslaughter. Miss Amy listened intently, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of disbelief. And then, Gustav continued, I would have tried to contact you, but I didn't want to be a bother. I figured it was time for me to start taking care of my own problems. Miss Amy's response was immediate. She knocked him lightly on the head, just as she had always done when he said something particularly foolish. You idiot, she said, her tone affectionate but firm. You should know by now that I will always show up for you. As many times as it takes. Ouch, Gustav rubbed his head while smiling. I know. But you've already done so much for me. I didn't want to drag you into my mess. Miss Amy sighed as her expression softened. Gustav, I may not have told you before, you're the one person I'll always look out for. So long as I am around, you don't have to face anything alone. Her words hit him hard, and he felt a surge of emotions but did his best to hide them. When did you become so sentimental? Is old age finally starting to catch up? I missed you too, you stubborn fool, she replied while knocking his head again. Gustav held his head while both of them suddenly burst out in laughter. It had been too long since they spoke like this. The Demon Queen and the one person who could make her display an array of emotions that usually wasn't present for anyone else. Gustav felt a sense of nostalgia. The only difference about this and the old times was their location as well as current level of strength. So, Gustav began, his voice echoing slightly in the still air, you've really been in Planet Humbad all this time? Miss Amy nodded with a look of seriousness. Yes. Gustav's eyes wandered over the decayed ring. It's hard to imagine this place once had life. Miss Amy smiled faintly. Indeed. But things change. Sometimes drastically. She paused, her gaze locking onto his. Gustav, I was aware when you were branded as a universal fugitive. Gustav's eyes widened in surprise. You knew? Yes, she said softly. Before I could do anything about it, I was accosted by a strange figure on my planet. This figure knew everything about you, your situation, and how things would turn out. Who was this person? Gustav inquired. Miss Amy took a deep breath. They called themselves a time candidate. A time candidate? Gustav repeated as he recalled Commander Ergril. Was it a Tark? Exactly, she confirmed. This time candidate told me that I had to follow specific steps to help you. They knew you would be in danger if things played out precisely according to how you plotted them, so I played a crucial role in your survival. What kind of steps? Although Gustav could already tell, he still asked. They gave me a set of instructions, Miss Amy explained. They told me to create a clone of myself to handle things on my planet while I came here to wait for you. The clone took care of all the necessary procedures to ensure you could get here safely. Gustav stared at her, processing the information. So that's why. Miss Amy nodded. I've been here for a long time. I lost track of the days, but I knew you'd make it here eventually. She looking out at the desolate landscape with a thoughtful expression. I am meant to lead you to Dimension 6, where the truth about your origin and everything else will be unveiled. A strange, ominous wind began to blow, swirling dust and debris around them. The wind carried a faint, eerie whisper, as if the planet itself was trying to communicate with them. You know where Dimension 6 is? He questioned. And what do you mean by origin? Miss Amy's gaze remained distant. I can't explain everything right now. The Time Candidate's instructions were clear: direct you to Planet Humbad, and personally lead you to Dimension 6. What's in Dimension 6 that I need to see? And why do you seem so evasive about it? Gustav's suspicion rose. She turned to him with a smile. Gustav, some truths are too dangerous to reveal all at once. But once you get to Dimension 6, you will get the answers you seek. I see. Gustav looked around the surroundings. I guess the existence of this place confirms the theory about Planet Humbad's destruction. The Slarkovs lied. Miss Amy nodded. Yes, the Slarkovs' history is tied to this place. Thousands of years of their civilization's secrets lie buried here, crumbling before our eyes. Gustav's mind reeled. The Slarkovs had always claimed their home planet was destroyed in a catastrophic event, but here he was, standing on the very soil they once called home. The realization that they had lied about such a fundamental aspect of their history was staggering. He always knew, but it was another thing to confirm the suspicions physically. He turned back to Miss Amy. Tell me the truth, Miss Amy, what am I supposed to find in Dimension 6? What does it have to do with me? Listen, kiddo, all I can say is, you will find answers about your past, your powers, and your true purpose and origins of a lot of things. I can't explain much about Dimension 6, but just prepare yourself. The wind howled louder, whipping Gustav's jacket and sending chills through his body. He clenched his fists in anticipation. Where is it? Gustav inquired. Miss Amy turned around and pointed in a particular direction. Shall we get to it then? He stated while getting to his feet. Are you ready? Miss Amy asked him. Gustav nodded in response while Miss Amy got to her feet. She placed her hand on Gustav's left shoulder and they immediately vanished from their spot. Gustav and Miss Amy reappeared before a massively caved-in part of the planet. The ground was opened up into an immense chasm that stretched as far as the eye could see. The scent of sulfur permeated the surroundings, and a red, magma-like glow emanated from the depths below, casting eerie shadows on the jagged walls of the crater. Gustav stared into the abyss with a slight look of trepidation. Is Dimension 6 down there? He asked. It's down there all right, she said with a serious tone. But you need to be very careful while we're descending. Down there is a part of the planet that is extremely fragile. If you channel your bloodline, it could cause the entire planet to split in half. Chapter 1539 Uncharted Descent. Chapter 1539 Uncharted Descent. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav nodded in understanding. So no powers. Yes. Don't channel at all. They began their descent, using the rough edges of the chasm to slowly make their way down. The walls of the crater were uneven, with sharp protrusions and narrow ledges that offered precarious footing. They jumped from one protrusion to the next, each movement calculated and deliberate. The descent was slow and treacherous. The deeper they went, the more intense the heat became, and the glow from the magma pits below grew brighter. Inasmuch as Miss Amy had told Gustav not to channel his bloodline, he was still very much unaffected by this level of heat. A normal mixed blood would have been toast by now, but Gustav still had inbuilt durability. How deep do you think this goes? Gustav asked while maintaining a steady gaze. It's hard to say, Miss Amy replied, her voice calm and steady. But it might take a while. As they continued to descend, the walls of the chasm seemed to close in around them. The air grew thicker and more oppressive. The glow from the magma pits illuminated the rocky surfaces, casting a reddish hue that made the entire scene feel surreal. Gustav glanced over at Miss Amy, who moved with ease. "You seem to know your way around here," he remarked. "I've had some time to explore," she said with a faint smile. The ledges grew narrower the further they descended, forcing them to be even more cautious. Gustav's entire body was at a very high temperature at this moment, but he maintained an unfazed look. After what felt like hours of careful maneuvering, the walls of the chasm were now almost vertical, forcing them to rely on handholds and footholds that were barely wide enough to support them. The air remained thick with heat and the stench of sulfur. Despite the challenges, they pressed on. The glow from the magma pits made the rocky surfaces appear almost molten. "Watch your step," Miss Amy cautioned as they approached a particularly narrow ledge. "One wrong move and we could fall, and you'd have to use energy which could cause a split." Gustav nodded as he carefully navigated the narrow path. His fingers clung to the rough rock as he maintained his balance. The ledge was barely wide enough to support them, and the heat from the magma pits below was becoming unbearable for his special-made outfit. The walls of the chasm seemed to pulse with a rhythmic energy. Miss Amy and Gustav continued their descent into the chasm. The journey had been ongoing for 12 hours at this point, and they were still at it. The terrain was a mix of narrow ledges, steep drops, and jagged rocks. Sometimes the edges were sloppy enough for them to walk down, but other times they had to jump from one protrusion to the next. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the desolate planet, and the bubbling sound of magma below grew louder, accompanied by an increasing heat that would have been unbearable for anyone else. Despite the oppressive environment, Gustav and Miss Amy's powerful bodies remained unaffected by the extreme conditions. The glow from the magma pits made the entire descent feel like a journey into the underworld. "It almost sounds like the planet is breathing," Gustav voiced. "The core of a planet is a place of immense energy. It feels alive because we're getting closer," Miss Amy responded without coming to a stop. Gustav looked around as his face was illuminated with red glow. "I've been thinking about the Slarkovs. They must have had some way of predicting this catastrophe. But how did they know it would happen?" Miss Amy considered his question while they kept stepping forward. The Slarkovs were masters of advanced technology and foresight. They likely had systems in place to monitor their solar system. When they detected the warp demolator, they would have known it was only a matter of time before their world was dragged through it. "But why Earth?" Gustav asked while leaping to a lower ledge. "Of all the planets, why choose Earth as their refuge?" Miss Amy moved almost like she was floating while answering Gustav. "They must have seen some kind of potential on Earth. If there's more to it, I have a feeling you'll find out down there." Gustav nodded thoughtfully. "They sure had everyone fooled. There better be a good reason why they never mentioned the warp demolator." The path grew steeper, and they had to slow their pace to navigate the treacherous terrain. "Will I truly find out everything in Dimension 6? Gustav wondered out loud. "I believe so," Miss Amy replied with a confident tone. "Unless that time candidate person is wrong." Gustav took a deep breath. They continued their descent and the bubbling sound of magma growing louder with each step. "I wonder what would have happened if the Slarkovs had stayed and found a way to save their planet. Mixed bloods most likely wouldn't exist, and all the technology." Gustav realized how choosing Earth really set many things motion. Miss Amy shook her head. The Slarkovs made the best choice they could under the circumstances. Staying would have meant certain death. By fleeing to Earth, they ensured their survival and the continuation of their legacy. "As much as I hate the existence of mixed bloods which was due to their decision, I am grateful for your existence. So I guess it's not all bad." Gustav glanced at her briefly. "PFFFT. It's the same for me, Miss Amy. Although I can't help but wonder if the world would have been kinder without blood-ins." The glow from the magma pits grew brighter, casting an almost blinding light on the rocky surfaces. The heat was now beyond bearable for fabrics. Scorched holes were starting to appear on Gustav's clothes. "How much further do you think we have to go?" Gustav was worried about being stripped completely naked before they arrived at their destination. "We're getting close," Miss Amy replied. Gustav was sure he had heard that before, but he decided to take Miss Amy's word for it. They continued to navigate the treacherous terrain, the path becoming increasingly unstable. Rocks crumbled beneath their feet, and the air was filled with the sound of distant rumbling. Back on planet Aegon, it had already been a couple of days. Yet, the air still carried the scent of Gustav's bittersweet departure. The group stood in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, their leaves rustling softly in the gentle breeze. Endrik stood at the center of the group, his expression resolute. "I need to find the other time candidate," he announced. "The fifth sacred item of the outworldly is crucial, and it's taking too long. Understandable, but not outer space missions for me at the moment. I think I need to spend some time with my earthly father. I haven't properly caught up with him, and I owe him that much," Falco said to everyone. Angie looked at Endrik in concern. "I wanted to wait here on planet Aegon, but Ethereal informed me that when Gustav returns, he will appear in a different location." EE stepped forward. "Angie, do you want to go back to the MBO in the meantime? It's better than waiting here without knowing where Gustav will show up." Angie sighed, her shoulders relaxing a bit. "That's true. I'm still an MBO officer after all." Ealdris smiled with a calm look. "I need to return to my family. It's time I take my position as the leader. I can no longer ignore my father's legacy. Besides, those bastards don't deserve it." A spark of excitement appeared in Rhea's eyes as he spoke up. "Endrik, I'm coming with you. I want to go on missions outside Earth." Endrik turned to him, his expression serious. "Rhea, it's going to be dangerous. We're going after a time candidate. There's no telling what we might encounter." Rhea's resolve was unwavering. "I know. But I'm ready for it." The group fell silent, the weight of their decisions hanging in the air. They had been through so much together, and now it was time for some to go their separate ways pending Gustav's return. Endrik suddenly cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Listen, everyone. We need to be prepared for Gustav's return. When he comes back, a battle line will be drawn. We have to be ready for whatever challenges lie ahead." EE furrowed his brows. "A battle line? What do you mean, Endrik?" Endrik met his gaze with a serious expression. "Gustav's return will mark the beginning of a new conflict. I believe it will be at a time where he is ready to face them head-on. We must be ready to stand with him. The fourth premonition is only a few months away." Angie had a perturbed expression. "What if Gustav doesn't return in time? What do we do then?" Endrik took a deep breath. "If Gustav hasn't returned by then, it will be up to us to prevent the devastation. We must be prepared for anything." Chapter 1540 Preparing for Future War. 1540 Preparing for Future War. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Ealdris addressed the group. "We have our individual paths to follow, but our ultimate goal is the same. We must stay connected and be ready to support each other when the time comes. We've been through a lot together. No matter where we go or what we face, we are family. Stay safe, everyone. We'll meet again," Endrik stated. "Take care, everyone. I'll see you when I see you," Falco added. "Be careful out there. Do come back safely," Angie said to Endrik. EE clapped Endrik on the shoulder. "Keep in touch, all right?" The group told one another goodbye and got ready to part ways. Rhea grinned in excitement. "Let's go, Endrik. Adventure awaits. You know, it's not all gonna be that simple, right?" Endrik had to remind Rhea that it was going to be dangerous. With their farewells said, the group began to disperse. Falco turned to head back to Earth, his mind already on the reunion with his father. Angie prepared to return to the MBO, and EE was ready to head back to the Independent Council. They could only hope for Gustav's safe return. Ealdris set off to take his rightful place as the leader of his family. Endrik and Rhea set off together in Gustav's spacecraft. "This mission is important. The outworldly needs all of his sacred items." Rhea nodded. "I understand, Endrik. I intend to take it seriously." In a high-tech laboratory on a secluded part of Earth, the air buzzed with the soft whir of advanced machinery and the faint crackle of static from numerous holographic projections. The room was large and filled with gleaming surfaces as well as an intricate array of scientific instruments. Holograms of molecular structures, energy fields, and biomechanical blueprints floated in the air, casting a soft blue glow over the metallic walls. Grand Commander Shun, an elderly but authoritative-looking man with a manet of silver hair and a diamond shard embedded in his forehead, stood at the center of this laboratory. His silvery eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail with an unreadable expression. Beside him was scientist Merkel, a slim man with sharp features and intense, intelligent eyes that seemed to see beyond the present. Merkel, Shun began with a resonant and commanding tone, "You mentioned a breakthrough in your research regarding the dark plane. I'm eager to hear the details." Scientist Merkel nodded with a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Indeed, Grand Commander Shun. We have made significant progress. Our research team has been working tirelessly, and we've developed 2 new methods that could change the tide in our struggle against the dark plane." Grand Commander Shien's expression remained stern, though his interest was piqued. "Go on." Merkel gestured to a nearby holographic display, which shifted to show a complex energy diagram. The first method involves stabilizing our soldiers' strength while they are in the dark plane. As you know, the dark plane has a debilitating effect on our forces, weakening them significantly. We've discovered a way to counteract this effect, allowing our soldiers to maintain their regular strength levels despite the plane's influence. Grand Commander Shun nodded while absorbing the information. "That is indeed promising. But you mentioned a second method as well?" Scientist Merkel's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and caution. "Yes, the second method is even more revolutionary. We've found a way to harness the dark plane's unique energy fields to amplify our soldiers' strength to unprecedented levels. By tapping into the dark plane's latent power, we can significantly enhance their abilities, potentially giving us a decisive advantage. However, that isn't all. This second method is also more complex because this technique harnesses energy from both the dark plane and the future potential of the mixed-blood soldiers. The result is a dramatic amplification of their strength, multiplying their capabilities many times over." Shun raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. Amplifying their strength sounds like a significant advantage. Why not focus solely on that? Merkel sighed, knowing the difficult truth he had to convey. While the amplification method offers immense power, it comes with severe risks. The dark plane's energy is highly volatile and unpredictable. By tapping into their future selves, the soldiers effectively accelerate their life force consumption. After the battle, they are likely to perish due to the immense strain on their bodies and minds. Shien's eyes narrowed, considering the implications. "I see. So, the first method provides stability and safety, while the second offers power but with greater risks." "Exactly," Merkel affirmed. "We must weigh the benefits against the potential dangers. While the amplification method could give us a critical edge in battle, we must be cautious in its application." A heavy silence settled over the room as Grand Commander Shun absorbed the gravity of Merkel's words. "So, if we pick the amplification method, we're asking our soldiers to make the ultimate sacrifice," Shun said slowly with a heavy voice. "Yet, if we're not ready to put everything on the line, we risk losing the battle entirely." Merkel nodded with a resolute expression. Shien's gaze was intense as he considered the options. "This is a difficult decision, but one we must make with clear eyes. We cannot afford to lose this battle. Focus your efforts on refining the amplification method. We need to ensure it is as effective and safe as possible under the circumstances." Merkel met Shien's gaze, understanding the gravity of the command. "I will prioritize the amplification method. Our team will work tirelessly to perfect it. With your permission, we will begin advanced trials immediately." "You have my permission." "How soon can we expect results?" Grand Commander Shun inquired. Merkel considered the timeline, already calculating the necessary steps. "If all goes well, we should have preliminary results within the next few weeks. We'll start with controlled simulations and move to live trials as soon as we are confident in the process." Shien's expression softened slightly, showing a rare moment of empathy. "Remember, Merkel, these are not just soldiers. They are our people, the live blood of the future generation. Ensure that every precaution is taken to protect them, even as we push forward. Merkel placed a reassuring hand on Cheyenne's arm. I understand, Grand Commander. We will do everything in our power to safeguard their lives and honor their sacrifices. Grand Commander Shen nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. Good. Keep me informed of your progress. The fate of our forces, and perhaps even the fate of Earth and the entire universe, rests on our ability to navigate these challenges. With a final nod, Grand Commander Shen turned and left the laboratory. His mind was already shifting to the broader strategic implications of their work and how he would break the news to the other Grand Commanders. Merkel watched him go, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The lab buzzed with a renewed sense of urgency as scientist Merkel briefed his team, outlining the critical steps needed to advance their research. The following days were a blur of intense activity. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, their focus on perfecting the amplification method. The air was filled with the vibrations of advanced machinery, the flicker of holographic displays, and the quiet murmur of intense discussions. Grand Commander Shen visited frequently to observe the simulations, review data, and provided guidance. His authoritative demeanor inspired confidence and determination in the team. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the secluded facility, Shen and Merkel stood before a large holographic projection displaying the latest data from the trials. The screen showed a detailed analysis of the energy flow, the physiological impacts on the soldiers, and the projected outcomes of the amplification process. Merkel, these preliminary results look promising, Grand Commander Shen remarked as his eyes scanned the data. But we must be absolutely certain before we move to live trials. The stakes are too high for any margin of error. Merkel nodded with a serious expression. I agree, Grand Commander. We've seen significant improvements in the simulations, but we need to ensure the process is as stable as possible. We're conducting rigorous stress tests and refining the energy transfer protocols to minimize the risks. Cheyenne's gaze was intense. And the soldiers? Have you identified those willing to undergo the trials? Yes, Merkel replied. We've carefully selected volunteers who understand the risks and are prepared to make the sacrifice if necessary. They are some of our most dedicated and courageous individuals. Shen had a slightly sentimental look in his eyes. Their bravery will not be forgotten. Ensure that they are given every support and preparation needed. They must be ready in mind and body. We will do everything we can to honor their commitment and protect their lives, Merkel stated. The days turned into weeks, and the trials progressed with increasing success. The team fine-tuned the amplification process, addressing each challenge with meticulous attention to detail. The volunteers underwent rigorous training, both physical and psychological, preparing themselves for the immense task ahead. Chapter 1541 Amplification Progress. 1541 Amplification Progress. Author's note. Unedited chapter within the laboratory. Holographic projections filled the space, displaying streams of data, complex energy diagrams, and molecular structures. Grand Commander Shen stood with an imposing look with his silver hair and the diamond shard embedded in his forehead before scientist Merkel. Merkel's intense eyes adjusted the holographic display to show the latest findings. Grand Commander, based on our current progress, the amplification method should be ready for implementation in a few weeks. We've made significant strides in stabilizing the energy transfer and minimizing the risks. Shen nodded thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the detailed data before him. Excellent work, Merkel. This breakthrough could be pivotal in our struggle against the Dark Plane. Merkel's expression was resolute. But still we must tread carefully, Grand Commander. I can only hope the training and psychological preparation for our soldiers yield results. Indeed, we must balance the need for power with the imperative of safety. I will inform the other 4 Grand Commanders of our progress. Together, we will decide the next steps for the future of Earth and the universe as a whole, Grand Commander Shen stated. I will continue to refine the process and ensure that everything is ready for the trials, scientist Merkel responded. As Shen turned to leave the laboratory, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room. The winds of ominosity. As he reached a private area, Grand Commander Shen activated the secure link to the other Grand Commanders. Holographic images of 4 distinguished figures appeared before him, each one representing a pillar of strength and leadership. Grand Commanders, Shen began, his voice carrying the weight of their collective responsibility. I have urgent updates regarding our efforts against the Dark Plane. Scientist Merkil and his team have made significant progress with the amplification method. It should be ready for implementation in a few weeks. Grand Commander Alara, a formidable-looking woman with green eyes and a calm demeanor, nodded. This is indeed promising news, Grand Commander Shen. The amplification of our soldiers' strength could turn the tide in our favor. Another Grand Commander leaned forward with a stern expression. What about the risks involved, Grand Commander Shen? We cannot afford to proceed without understanding the full implications. There is no sugarcoating it. It's dangerous and can lead to their demise. The amplification method draws power from both the Dark Plane and the future potential of our mixed-blood soldiers. While it offers immense strength, it is also highly taxing. Prolonged use could result in the death of the soldiers involved. Only those willing to make the ultimate sacrifice would be considered for this task. Grand Commander Zorin, an elderly man with a wise and contemplative air, spoke up. We must be cautious. The balance of power and safety is delicate. What measures are in place to ensure our soldiers are adequately prepared? Merkil is refining the process and implementing rigorous training and psychological preparation. Volunteers will be the first to give it a try so we may know what step to take next. If our soldiers are to make such sacrifices, we need to ensure it is for a decisive victory. We cannot afford to squander their lives, another Grand Commander stated. Cheyenne's gaze was steady. I agree. This is why we must coordinate our efforts and plan our next steps carefully. The decision we make here will shape the future of Earth and the universe. The holographic images of the Grand Commanders flickered slightly. After a moment of silence, Alara spoke with a resolute tone. We will convene again once the trials are complete to decide on the deployment. Shen nodded. I will keep you all updated. As the communication ended, Shen stood in the quiet room with an indescribable expression. The winds of foreboding seemed to whisper through the walls. Returning to the laboratory, Shen found Merkil and his team deep in their work. He approached Merkil, his presence commanding attention. Merkil, the other Grand Commanders are informed. We have their support, but we must proceed with caution. Merkil nodded. We will not falter. Our efforts will be thorough and precise. They proceeded with their work in the laboratory, conducting simulations and stress tests to ensure stability and safety. The first selected volunteers underwent rigorous training, their resolve unwavering in the face of the immense task ahead. One evening, as the final preparations were underway, Shen gathered the team for a briefing. The room was filled with anticipation and determination. Holographic displays flickered with the latest data, casting a soft glow over the faces of those present. Everyone, Shen began, his voice resonating with authority, we stand on the brink of a new era. The work you have done here is nothing short of remarkable. The time has come to take the next step. He turned to the volunteers. You are the best of us. Your courage and dedication are an inspiration. As you prepare to engage in these trials, know that you carry the hopes and strength of all of us. We are with you, every step of the way. The volunteers stood tall, their faces reflecting a mix of pride and determination. One of them, a young woman named Kira, spoke. We know the risks, sir, and we accept them. For our people, for our future, we will do whatever it takes. Shen nodded while smiling. Thank you, Kira. Your bravery honors us all. As the volunteers prepared for the trials, the laboratory buzzed with activity. Final checks were made, systems calibrated, and the amplification process initiated. The moment arrived, and the volunteers stepped into the controlled environment for the trials. The lab fell silent, every eye fixed on the holographic displays tracking their progress. Seconds turned into minutes, each one filled with anticipation and anxiety. The data streams fluctuated, reflecting the intense energy transfer and the physical toll on the volunteers. Back on the desolate planet Humbad, the journey down the chasm had been arduous for Gustav and Miss Amy. The days stretched into a week, each one filled with the oppressive heat and the constant vigilance required to navigate the treacherous path. The walls of the chasm were lined with jagged rocks and strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy. The scent of sulfur drizzled across the air and the distant rumble of magma pits provided a constant, ominous soundtrack to their descent. "We've been descending for so long," Gustav remarked with a slightly distraught look. "Are we ever going to reach the bottom?" Miss Amy nodded. "We're getting close, but it appears the bottom isn't what we expected. Look." Gustav followed her gaze and saw the chasm's floor ahead, but it was covered in a bubbling, magma-like liquid. Pillars of rock protruded from the molten surface, creating a dangerous and unpredictable terrain. The red glow from the magma illuminated the entire area, casting long, flickering shadows on the rocky walls. "Be careful," Miss Amy cautioned. "I'm sure it'll be fine. I just wish we could move faster." Gustav let out a little sigh. They moved carefully with deliberate and measured steps. The heat from the magma had risen to unprecedented heights, but they were still okay. The rocky pillars provided some stability, but they had to be cautious, testing each foothold before putting their weight on it. 10:28 As they continued, the sights around them became more intricate. Debris from what looked like ancient structures lay scattered across the chasm, remnants of a civilization long gone. The pillars of rock protruding from the magma reminded him of a twisted, otherworldly landscape, like something out of a nightmare. "Do you think this place was once inhabited?" Gustav asked, his voice echoing slightly in the vast chasm. Miss Amy nodded. "It's possible. If Dimension 6 was always located here, then it makes sense for the surroundings to have been formerly inhabited." They continued their cautious descent as the heat kept intensifying. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a relatively stable area near the bottom. The magma-like liquid was still everywhere, but there were enough solid footholds to navigate without stepping directly into it. "I don't see much roads to move on," he said to Miss Amy. Miss Amy eyes scanning the area for a safe path. "Just keep following me." They moved carefully, testing each step before committing to it. The bubbling magma hissed and popped around them, the heat radiating off the surface in waves. After days of navigating the treacherous chasm, Gustav and Miss Amy finally reached what appeared to be the real bottom. The landscape before them was a vast expanse of bubbling, magma-like liquid stretching across thousands of miles, glowing with a malevolent red hue. The entire scene was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Gustav was almost completely stark naked at this point. Inasmuch as he would have loved to take out another attire from his spatial storage space, using any form of energy could cause problems. Gustav stopped at the edge, staring out over the molten expanse. "We can't move any further," his voice tinged with frustration. "How are we supposed to find anything down here?" Chapter 1542 Entry Point Hindrance. Chapter 1542 Entry Point Hindrance. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Miss Amy didn't respond immediately. Instead, she continued walking forward, with confident and deliberate strides. Gustav watched in surprise as the magma-like liquid began to part before her, creating a narrow path through the molten sea. Gustav's eyes widened in astonishment. "Miss Amy, what are you doing? I thought you said not to use abilities." Miss Amy glanced back at him with a calm smile on her face. "Gustav, I am a transcendent being. My abilities won't affect the integrity of this planet's fragile core. I can create a path for us." Gustav hesitated for a moment before following her, carefully stepping onto the newly formed path. The heat radiating from the magma was intense, but the path Miss Amy created was cool and solid under his feet. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Gustav asked as they walked, his voice a mixture of relief and curiosity. Miss Amy's smile widened. "I wanted you to see the magnitude of what we are dealing with. Sometimes, experiencing the journey firsthand is the best way to understand the challenges we face." Gustav nodded, absorbing her words. "So, where are we headed now?" To the heart of this place, Miss Amy replied. The path will lead us to it. They continued walking, the path winding through the sea of molten liquid. The glowing magma cast eerie shadows on the cavern walls, creating a surreal and otherworldly atmosphere. Gustav couldn't help but marvel at the sight, even as he remained vigilant for any signs of danger. As they walked, Gustav's mind raced with questions. Miss Amy, what exactly are we looking for down here? We'll know when we see it, Miss Amy answered. Gustav was just curious as to what to look out for, but it seemed like Miss Amy wasn't too sure herself. As Gustav and Miss Amy continued their journey forward, the magma-like liquid continued to part before them, creating a pathway that snaked through the vast expanse of molten rock. The walls of magma rose on either side, forming a corridor that shimmered with intense heat and light. Despite the treacherous surroundings, Gustav felt a sense of calm. His trust in Miss Amy's abilities were unwavering. They walked in silence for what seemed like hours, the only sounds being the bubbling of the magma and the soft tap of their own footsteps. The path beneath their feet gradually began to change, shifting from the rough, uneven surface of the chasm to something more refined and constructed. The ground took on a smoother texture, and intricate patterns began to emerge, etched into the very rock itself. Gustav paused, glancing around in awe. The ground here, it's unscathed. Miss Amy nodded. Yes, kiddo. We're getting closer. As they continued, the refined ground gave way to an expansive platform that stretched out before them. It was incredibly large, its surface unscathed by the surrounding magma. The platform's structure was nearly indescribable. It was a blend of intricate patterns and futuristic designs that seemed both ancient and advanced. At the center of the platform stood a structure that seemed to defy the very fabric of reality. It was both in time and out of time, a paradoxical blend of past and future. Various technological constructs adorned its surface, their designs sleek and incredibly advanced. Holographic interfaces flickered with streams of data, and strange, glowing symbols adorned the walls. Gustav's eyes widened in astonishment. Is this it? Miss Amy smiled, her eyes filled with a sense of reverence. Yes, Gustav, this is Dimension 6. Gustav stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the structure. Dimension 6. At last. However, Gustav couldn't see the system notification alert that he had completed the second 5 years quest just yet. He figured that he probably needed to get in first. The knowledge and power contained here will help you understand your origins. Prepare yourself, Gustav. What you'll find in there will be beyond your current imagination. Bet. Gustav mumbled. They approached the structure, the air around them thrummed with energy. Gustav could feel the power radiating from the platform, a tangible force that seemed to resonate with his very being. The intricate patterns on the ground pulsed with light, guiding their steps toward the heart of Dimension 6. Miss Amy and Gustav reached the entry point of Dimension 6, only to find themselves unable to proceed. An invisible force seemed to push them back, preventing any further movement. The air around them thrummed with a strange energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to shimmer and distort. Gustav frowned as his brows furrowed. Is there some sort of code for access? Miss Amy's eyes scanned the surroundings. Let's look around. The answers are often hidden in plain sight. Gustav turned his attention to the walls around them, noticing for the intricate artistic depictions that adorned the stone. The carvings were beautiful and elaborate, telling a story through a series of images and symbols. He moved closer, examining them with keen interest. These carvings, they tell a tale, Gustav said, his voice filled with wonder. It's about the creation and access to Dimension 6. Miss Amy nodded, joining him in examining the depictions. Looks like the Slarkovs recorded some of their history and knowledge through art. Let's see what we can learn. As they studied the carvings, the story began to unfold. The first series of images showed a group of beings, presumably the Slarkovs, standing before a darkened sky. Then a drop of something that looked like a water but certainly wasn't water, fell to the ground. The ground caved in and some impossible structures came into existence. That was Dimension 6. A place depicted as a realm of infinite possibilities, where wishes could be granted, and resources were abundant. Oh, Gustav mused, it was like a paradise. A realm where anything was possible. Miss Amy pointed to the next set of images. But look here. The dimension seemed to have demanded something in return. The images showed a series of warnings, depicted through symbolic representations. The message was clear, the dimension would grant anything you needed, but greed would be met with severe punishment. The final images were grim, showing individuals who had ignored the warnings being met with gruesome fates. So, the dimension punishes greed, Gustav said slowly. It only grants what you need, not what you want. Those who were greedy faced dire consequences. Miss Amy's expression was serious. It looks like the power of Dimension 6 is immense, but it wishes to be respected. It possesses sentience. We must be mindful of our intentions. Gustav nodded. There must be a way to pass this barrier. We must be something we're missing. They continued to examine the carvings, looking for any clues that might help them. Gustav's eyes fell on a small, almost hidden depiction near the bottom of one of the walls. It showed a figure getting something and afterwards getting pushed out. After the depictions, the images seemed to display some changes. People trying to get in but being unable to. There is no access. It's locked. Forever, Gustav came to this realization. If the dimension had been in existence since before the planet got pulled into the stagnant citrus void, there was no doubt that it had been locked for centuries already. What were they supposed to do about that? There has to be some sort of way to get in, Gustav said while moving around. He went around again and scanned the surroundings multiple times but still came up blank. It looked like Dimension 6 was thoroughly sealed without no form of entry. Did that mean coming here was for naught? He couldn't possibly let it end here now that they had reached this pivotal point. Miss Amy, can I use my abilities now? Gustav inquired. Yeah, sure. Dimension 6 blankets the surroundings so the planet's core will be O. Even before Miss Amy could answer completely. Boom. Gustav had thrown a fist at the invisible barrier preventing them from moving any further. I don't think that's gonna. Before Miss Amy could caution him again. Boom. Gustav's fist rammed into it once more, causing the surroundings to tremble immensely. Despite the amount of strength Gustav put into his fists, they were unable to punch a hole through whatever was hindering them. He arched his arm back intensely, letting his energy climb to ridiculous levels as he prepared to strike again. Miss Amy's hair and clothes flapped intensely as the air crackled. He has really grown, she couldn't help but smile as she watched him from the side. Boom. Gustav's fist drove into the hindrance, causing a devastating clash to ring out as torrents of wind swept across the surroundings. Even the magma in the surroundings were affected by this, causing a storm of steam to erupt. After a couple of seconds, the steam slowly reduced and the hindering invisible wall remained unmoving. Even the ground beneath their feet didn't crack from Gustav's intensity. There was no doubt that Dimension 6 power was astronomical. Kohila. Gustav called forth as rhombus-shaped patterns of light surrounded his form. Chapter 1543 Reaching Dimension 6. Chapter 1543 Reaching Dimension 6 Author's Note. Unedited chapter. Gustav stared at the structure, his eyes wide with awe. What is that? Miss Amy's eyes were filled with wonder. It looks like some kind of temple or shrine. This must be the heart of the chasm, where the answers we seek are hidden. They carefully made their way towards the structure, using the rocky pillars and ledges to navigate the treacherous terrain. As they approached, Gustav could see that the structure was covered in intricate carvings and symbols, similar to those they had seen on the walls of the chasm. This place is incredible, Gustav said, his voice filled with awe. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Miss Amy nodded, her eyes scanning the carvings. These symbols, they tell a story. We need to decipher them to understand what happened here. They carefully examined the carvings, their eyes tracing the intricate designs and patterns. The symbols seemed to depict a history of the Slarkovs, their rise to power, and their eventual fall. Gustav felt a shiver run down his spine as he realized the significance of what they were seeing. "This is it," Gustav said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the key to understanding my past." Miss Amy nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to be thorough. Let's document everything we can and try to piece together the story." They spent hours carefully examining the carvings, documenting every detail. The story they uncovered was one of power, ambition, and ultimately, tragedy. The Slarkovs had been a powerful civilization, but their hubris had led to their downfall. The warp demolator had dragged their planet into the stagnant citrus void, and they had fled to Earth in a desperate bid for survival. "This is incredible," Gustav said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and sadness. "They were so powerful, but they couldn't escape their fate." Miss Amy placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "The past is filled with lessons. We must learn from them and use that knowledge to shape our future." Gustav nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right. We need to take this information back and use it to understand the connection to my past and the challenges we face." As they continued their exploration of the ancient structure, Gustav couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer scale of the place. The carvings and symbols told a story that spanned centuries, a testament to the power and ambition of the Slarkovs. "Miss Amy," Gustav said, his voice filled with determination, "we need to make sure this knowledge isn't lost. We need to document everything and take it back with us." Miss Amy nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. "Agreed. This information is too important. We must ensure it is preserved and used to guide our future." As they carefully documented the carvings and symbols, Gustav felt a sense of connection to the ancient civilization. The Slarkovs had been powerful, but their ambition had led to their downfall. He vowed to learn from their mistakes and use the knowledge they had uncovered to shape a better future. After hours of careful documentation, they finally had a comprehensive record of the carvings and symbols. Exhausted but satisfied, they made their way back to the solid ledge overlooking the chasm. "We did it," Gustav said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and accomplishment. "We uncovered the truth." Miss Amy nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes, we did. Now we must use this knowledge to guide us forward." As they began their ascent back up the chasm, Gustav felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey had been long and arduous, but they had uncovered the secrets of the past and gained the knowledge they needed to face the challenges ahead. The climb back up was just as treacherous as the descent, but Gustav and Miss Amy moved with a sense of determination and resolve. They navigated the rocky pillars and ledges with care, avoiding the bubbling magma below. As they reached the upper levels of the chasm, Gustav couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the journey they had undertaken. They had descended into the depths of the planet and uncovered the secrets of an ancient civilization. The knowledge they had gained would guide them in the challenges ahead. Finally, after days of climbing, they reached the top of the chasm. Exhausted but triumphant, they looked out over the desolate landscape of planet Humbad. "We did it," Gustav said, his voice filled with pride. "We uncovered the truth and made it back." Miss Amy nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Yes, we did. And now, we must use this knowledge to face the challenges ahead and shape a better future." As they began their journey back to their base, Gustav felt a renewed sense of purpose. The knowledge they had gained from the depths of the chasm would guide them in the battles ahead, and he was determined to use it to create a better future for himself and those he cared about. The journey had been long and arduous, but the knowledge they had uncovered was invaluable. As they made their way back across the desolate landscape after days of navigating the treacherous chasm, Gustav and Miss Amy finally reached what appeared to be the real bottom. The landscape before them was a vast expanse of bubbling, magma-like liquid stretching across thousands of miles, glowing with a malevolent red hue. The heat was intense, and the air was thick with the smell of sulfur. The entire scene was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a stark reminder of the planet's volatile nature. Gustav stopped at the edge, staring out over the molten expanse. "We can't move any further," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "How are we supposed to find anything down here?" Miss Amy didn't respond immediately. Instead, She continued walking forward, her steps confident and deliberate. Gustav watched in surprise as the magma-like liquid began to part before her, creating a narrow path through the molten sea. Gustav's eyes widened in astonishment. "Miss Amy, what are you doing? I thought you said not to use abilities." Miss Amy glanced back at him, a calm smile on her face. "Gustav, I am a transcendent being. My abilities won't affect the integrity of this planet's fragile core. I can create a path for us." Gustav hesitated for a moment before following her, carefully stepping onto the newly formed path. The heat radiating from the magma was intense, but the path Miss Amy created was cool and solid under his feet. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Gustav asked as they walked, his voice a mixture of relief and curiosity. Miss Amy's smile widened. "I wanted you to see the magnitude of what we are dealing with. Sometimes, experiencing the journey firsthand is the best way to understand the challenges we face." Gustav nodded, absorbing her words. "So, where are we headed now?" "To the heart of this place," Miss Amy replied. "There is something here that holds the answers we seek. The path will lead us to it." They continued walking, the path winding through the sea of molten liquid. The glowing magma cast eerie shadows on the cavern walls, creating a surreal and otherworldly atmosphere. Gustav couldn't help but marvel at the sight, even as he remained vigilant for any signs of danger. As they walked, Gustav's mind raced with questions. "Miss Amy, what exactly are we looking for down here?" "There is a chamber deep within this chasm," she explained. "It holds ancient knowledge and artifacts that can help us understand the connection between you and the Slarkovs. It is also the key to unlocking the power you possess." Gustav's curiosity deepened. "And this chamber, it's been here for how long?" "Centuries, perhaps millennia," Miss Amy said. "The Slarkovs were a powerful civilization, and they left behind many secrets. This is one of their most guarded locations." As they continued down the path, Gustav noticed that the air seemed to grow cooler, and the light from the magma dimmed slightly. They were approaching a massive, ancient structure embedded in the cavern wall. It was covered in intricate carvings and symbols, similar to those they had seen earlier but far more elaborate. "This is it," Miss Amy said, stopping before the structure. "The entrance to the chamber." Gustav stared at the structure, awe and apprehension mixing in his expression. "What do we need to do to get inside?" Miss Amy placed her hand on the carvings, and they began to glow with a soft blue light. The ground beneath them rumbled, and a hidden door slowly slid open, revealing a dark passageway. "Follow me," Miss Amy said, stepping into the passageway. Gustav took a deep breath and followed her, the door closing behind them. The passageway was dimly lit by the same blue glow from the carvings, casting an ethereal light on the walls. As they moved deeper, the air grew cooler and the rumbling of the magma receded, replaced by an almost tangible sense of ancient power. "Miss Amy," Gustav said quietly, "what exactly will we find in this chamber?" "Knowledge," she replied. "And power. The Slarkovs left behind many artifacts that can help you understand your heritage and unlock your potential. But be prepared, Gustav. The journey ahead will not be easy." Gustav nodded, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. As they reached the end of the passageway, they entered a vast chamber filled with towering columns and ancient relics. The walls were covered in more of the glowing carvings, and the air was thick with the sense of history and power. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,